All right. Well, we may be live, we may not, who knows. In any case, welcome to Medieval Cooking in a Modern Kitchen with the Contessa. I'm the Contessa, and tonight I've got a really fantastic recipe planned for everyone. But of course, as always, I need to do some sound checks. So if you are out there and listening, if we all remember the delightful time last time doing the sound check, please let me know if you can actually hear me. That would be super useful. Right, so let me just show you the setup that we have this evening. I've got all the ingredients laid out. I'm using my replica medieval candle holder by Todd Cutler, which he's not a channel sponsor. I'm just mentioning it because his stuff is awesome. And I think I planned originally to do 2 recipes tonight, but I'm pretty certain we're only going to get through one once I considered the amount of labor that was going to be involved in the one. But if we get through it and there's time, we will add in the almond butter, but we'll see. Yeah. Audio is what? How can you tell audio is good? He's not a channel sponsor. I see. Okay. Okay, fantastic. Great. Okay.
I'll turn it down so you can't hear yourself.
That would be great. Okay, yes. So medieval cooking in a modern kitchen. Of course, I have done plenty of cooking over a fire using replica medieval implements only. Uniquely, takes all day. I don't have that option here because I don't have almost any of my medieval cooking equipment here, as in none. And I'm currently in Daegu, South Korea, and they will probably get really upset if I just build a fire on the roof of the apartment building where we're currently renting a vacation apartment. So we will be using the modern stove, but that's okay because part of the purpose of today's cooking session, of all of these cooking sessions, is to work through medieval recipes, authentic medieval recipes from the original sources or the transcriptions and translations of original medieval cooking manuals, recipe collections, and to prepare something that you can prepare in your own kitchen for your own daily life. And today's recipe, one of the reasons I picked it is because it will make fantastic event food. So today we are making chicken dumplings. And I know that sounds so workaday, but I have read through hundreds of medieval recipes over the years. I have read through dozens of recipe collections from the 14th, 15th, and even 16th century. And this is a recipe I haven't seen in exactly this form. And when I use the word dumpling, I'm not using that in the American sense of the weird noodles that are cooked in chicken broth or whatever. These are actually chicken meatballs, but the word in the original German source, Low German source, is Kloten, which is from close, same word in modern German, basically. And it is, in fact, it's a dumpling, really, if you think about it. Yeah. So today's collection is unique. We are actually working from, and I mentioned this earlier in the medieval sewing party live stream I did earlier, we're going to be working from the Libelles de Arti Coquinaria. And I will, as always, if you go to my community post on YouTube, you can see the book with its cover and its ISBN if you wish to purchase it for yourself. What's fascinating about this particular source is that it's basically a recipe collection that dates to at least as early as the 13th century, but possibly the 12th century. And it was copied at least 4 times from an original. The original sadly no longer exists. The original from the 12th century no longer exists, but the 13th century versions do. And what's interesting about these is that they focus on Northern European cookery. And by Northern, I mean Scandinavia and Iceland. How fascinating is that? So these are actually the oldest version that we currently have was written in Low German. And then there is a version in Danish and a version, or 2 versions in Danish and a version in Icelandic. And the Icelandic version is actually currently housed in the Royal Irish Library in Dublin, or the Royal Irish Academy Library in Dublin, Royal Library in Dublin. And I have not been able to ascertain as to how it ended up there, that recipe collection ended up in the library in Dublin, nor when it ended up in Dublin. So for all I know, this manuscript may have been somewhere in Ireland from the time, it may have been there from the Middle Ages on forward. There were lots of trade connections between Ireland and Iceland because of their geographic locations. So it would be fascinating if some of the recipes in here were actually prepared in medieval Ireland. Right. So Today's recipe appears in 3 of these 4 sources, which allows for the process of concordance pretty nicely. So for those who don't know what concordance is, when you have multiple sources for a historical moment or a dance or music, or in this case, a recipe, you can actually compare each of the versions against each other. And if there are holes, if there are gaps in one version, in this case of the recipe, then you can use some of the other recipes to fill it in. And especially with medieval cookery, it very often happens that no one recipe has all the instructions you need. Same thing with dance. So you often need to layer them on top of each other to get the full picture because, of course, medieval recipe collections are very much like a modern recipe. Many of you may have never really looked at a modern recipe for a common dish that everyone knows. You may not have looked at it critically from the perspective of someone who's A, never seen the dish, B, never eaten the dish, and C, is from centuries in the future. My point is that every recipe assumes a certain amount of common knowledge, whether it's about how it should look, how it should taste, or even basic cooking techniques that everyone just kind of knows. Right. So medieval recipes are exactly the same. They assume a lot, even more knowledge than modern recipes do. Medieval recipes, 90% of the time, assume you know how much of any given ingredient is needed, that you know exactly how to dismember a chicken the way it should be dismembered, that you know how to add egg yolk to a hot broth in such a way that it thickens the broth and doesn't just turn into stracciatella, right? So lots of assumptions are made in these recipes, and we, the modern medievalist redactors, have to fill in those blanks through our own knowledge of cooking, in my case, of culinary arts, the culinary arts and sciences, or through pure experimentation of ruining a lot of food before you finally get to a dish that's edible. Right, okay, so let us go ahead and start by reading the recipe. Now, the reason this source is called Libeles de Arte Coquinaria is because one of the 4 manuscripts actually starts that way. And what's interesting about that manuscript is that each of the recipes has a title in Latin, but the text in that one is Icelandic. I think that's the one that's in Icelandic. It might be the one that's in Danish, actually. Let me see. It is the one that's in Icelandic. So the version of this recipe collection that's in Icelandic has about 35 recipes, which is actually relatively few for medieval recipe collections. So this is the one that it's in Icelandic, and yet the title is, it says incipit or incipit by medieval Latin pronunciation, Incipit Libelis de Arte Coquinaria, which literally means here begins the book of the art of cooking. Right, so that is very interesting. The others don't bother to give it a title. They just launch right into the recipe collection. So if you have questions as we're working along, feel free to pop them in that live chat. I am paying attention. And if you're watching and enjoying and would like to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe or follow. If you're watching from a mobile device, on YouTube anyway, you can double tap the screen and that will show your love, I guess, if we want to look at it that way.
Say hi to Big Racer.
Big Racer, thank you for joining us again. Did you even sleep? I took a little nap myself, so I would be fully prepared and re-energized for today's adventure. Let us go ahead and start by reading the composite version of the recipe. I'm not going to read all 4 separately. I'm going to read the composite version. Right. Okay. So, Hunderkloten, and that's all. That's all the medieval Low German you're going to get out of me today. Okay, so it says, boil an old hen whole, take another raw hen and chop it finely, and mix it with bacon diced as small as peas and ground cumin. Make this mixture into small pieces. Place them in the broth of the boiled hen and add cumin, saffron, wine, lard, salt, and egg yolks to thicken it evenly. This is called chicken dumplings. And then there's some added instructions from one of the other versions. And then after the thickening, one should boil that old hen in all of this again. Okay, so it's actually a pretty short recipe, but there's a lot of prep work that's going to go into this, especially the taking another raw hen and chopping it finely. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get started by boiling the old hen whole. So why an old hen? Okay, that makes total sense to me. So the reason, if you look at this recipe, we're actually starting from scratch. They're not assuming that you have chicken stock just hanging out in your cabinet in a, Tetra Pak, or chicken stock frozen in your freezer or in a can somewhere, or bouillon that you can render into instant chicken stock. They're assuming you have to make the chicken stock. So we're starting by making chicken stock. And that's because when we then cook the chicken dumplings, the chicken stock will flavor them and enhance their flavor, right? So we want maximum flavor. So there's multiple steps here where we're infusing flavor. So we start by boiling this old hen whole, and then the one recipe says to dismember it. And then we're going to need to dismember another hen and chop it finely. And then that's the ground meat. That's the closest they have to ground meat. Someone asked me last week if they had a way to grind meat. Yes, it's called knife work. I have no evidence in Western Europe of a meat grinder as such. Literally, we're going to take this knife and we're going to chop it to the size of, she says, chop it finely. Pretty damn finely, because we want it to bind together. So more finely is better. This is it. This is your meat grinder. I actually don't know when meat grinders were invented. If any of you know when meat grinders were invented, go ahead and pop that in the live chat or in the comments if you're watching this as a recording. So while the chicken is boiling, we will then, of course, take that raw hen and we will chop it finely, but that's going to involve deboning it, right? There's all kinds of things that are assumed here. You notice, take another raw hen and chop it finely. Pretty certain it doesn't mean just to chop all those bones into it, right? So again, it's assumed that you know that you should debone the chicken. I'm pretty certain. In any case, we will definitely be deboning the chicken. And then it says, mix that with, now the translation here is bacon. I disagree with this translation for a couple of reasons. First off, for those who don't know, in the life before AI ate my two careers, I was a professional translator. Germanic languages were one of my specialties, Romance languages are the other. And the word for bacon here is actually also the word for pork belly. And bacon, especially for the modern reader, conjures ideas of, streaky bacon, for Americans anyway, that fries up crisp and it's smoked and it's got all this really added extra flavor. In the United Kingdom, you've got rashers, right? And it's a cured meat also. No, they don't mean cured bacon. That's not what they mean. They mean pork belly, because one of the other recipes actually specifies pork meat. And the word that is used here doesn't imply, especially not in the Middle Ages, that it's been smoked and prepared. It's just pork belly. I love pork belly, so I'm super excited about that prospect. The pork belly is the best part of the pig. It, hands down. I will fight you over that. Next best part of the pig, the joints. Haxe, Fleischhaxe. Schweinefleischhaxe. So yummy. Anyway, back to, I haven't had dinner yet, can you tell? So we're going to be deboning this chicken and we're going to be chopping it finely. Another thing it doesn't say anything about is whether we should remove the skin or not. So that's something we have to decide. Are we going to chop the skin into it? If we chop the skin into it, that's going to add the extra fat and the extra collagen from the skin. And the more flavor. I am actually kind of leaning towards chopping the skin into it. I don't know. What do you think? Should we chop the skin into our raw chicken, our raw hen, which apparently is not old, or not? And that's why I forget to address the topic of old hen. Boil an old hen whole. Why an old hen? Why an old hen? Well, we don't really have these choices. At least I don't have a way where I currently live to get an old hen. I don't know anyone with chickens who has a hen that's ready to die from old age. But the old hen is going to be tough. She's going to be gristly. She's going to be stringy. And so, the boiling is almost the only thing you can really do with that meat that's really kind of appealing at that point, is using it to make stock and boiling it until it's super tender. Right, so that makes total sense. And then the reason that it doesn't say an old hen for the raw hen is because it's assumed, you probably know, that if you're going to make some kind of fresh, not boiled, not highly long, slow cooked dish like meatballs, that you want a younger, fresher, more tender bird, I'm assuming. But it's also interesting that they specify hen. So the other option would be a capon, and a capon is a castrated male chicken, a castrated rooster. Capons are like eunuchs. they get fat and they get they get tender. But it's interesting that it specifies hen and not capon. That is an interesting note. Right, so after we chop our raw hen, which we're still deciding whether we want to include the skin or not, we will then also have to dice our pork belly. And I'll just show you, these are our hens. Now, I am in South Korea. One of the many great things about being in South Korea is look how little these hens are. Look how tiny these hens are. These are medieval-sized hens. These are much closer to medieval-sized hens than the scary monstrosities that we have in the United States. So this is definitely closer to what we'd be experiencing. And you'll notice the breasts are normal-sized, not double F breast augmentees like we get in the United States. So we don't have, large amounts of excess flesh where we shouldn't. So this is one of the nice things about being here in Korea is I can actually, in some cases, get ingredients that are actually closer to their medieval European ones than we could get in, for example, places like the United States. Oh, Takeda, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us. Right. Okay, so moving on. Oh, and I'd like to point out that this week I actually used a Turkish towel just wrapped around my waist for an apron to make sure we're keeping the look as uniform as possible. As I told you, I don't have my medieval actual apron here for cooking, which would actually have be basically like a jumper over top of this, a pinafore. But I don't have that with me. So I went with the waist apron of just a linen Turkish towel, which is pretty close to, the way that medieval European towels looked as well. Okay, so moving on. I would actually like to go ahead and get the chicken boiling. Oh, thank you, Swanpuss. Really appreciate that. I would like to go ahead and get the chicken boiling. And again, this week we're going to be using our clay pots. It might be a little inconvenient because they're not very big. I guess, we can just go and get a bigger, one of the big brown clay pots, the Korean ones.
Oh.
Yeah.
You mean go to a store and get it?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think
we don't have any here. They're in Hattiesburg at the moment.
We do own bigger ones.
Okay. So we're to try to simulate a little bit more like medieval clay cooking pots. I'm going to be using my Korean clay cooking pots. I have one that is actually basically a historic one here, really nice, but it's even smaller in volume than my decidedly more modernly decorated one. Modernly decorated, lovely, but modern. But they're clay pots, and they add a little more verisimilitude to the medieval cooking experience versus using modern high carbon steel pots. So we're going to be going with that. And I know it might take a little bit longer, but there it is. Now, again, these adorable little hens. No, these are not babies. These are full-grown chickens. The nice thing about this being a small chicken is it will fit in here. It's not going to be quite submerged all the way, so I'm going to have to turn it a couple of times as it cooks. This is not an old hen, so it's not going to take as long for it to fall apart. Now, what's interesting is that it says to cook it first and then dismember it. It's way easier to dismember a cooked bird than an uncooked bird, so I love that bit of convenience. Comment, clay pots don't collect germs from raw meat. No, they're sealed. It's sealed clay. It's glazed. This one's sealed, and the other one is glazed. So no, no, they do not. These are sealed. Yeah, no, these are sealed. And by the way, I use my wooden cutting boards all the time for raw meat. I just sanitize them with salt and boiling water, and sometimes I put them in the UV light, just the way medieval people did, actually. Okay, so we're just going to take our not old hen, pretend it's an old hen. We're going to put it in our pot. And it just says to boil it in this case. So the initial process here, the whole purpose here is that we are going to be creating our chicken stock. That's the purpose of this. So probably what I will do with the chicken after it's boiled is I'll turn it into a chicken salad or something, or a yummy chicken and cheese bake or something like that. But yeah, I'm definitely not discarding it. So let me just go ahead and pop some water on this. And again, because the pot is a little bit shallow even despite the petiteness of this chicken, it just means we're going to have to rotate it, and that's fine.
I cheated. You didn't haul the water back from the river?
Yeah, I can't. Well, okay. None of you wanted me to go to the river and haul water after watching the water drain off of the roads into the river today. No.
Or that
No.
dude dumping his
Oh my God, or that asshole dumping his used oil right into the drain that drains into the river. You know, a lot of, just like in many parts of the world, actually, here in Korea, the younger generations are very, very environmentally conscientious, right? They take all sorts of measures to be better stewards of their environment. But Koreans who basically date to the Korean War, or at least grew up during the Korean War or right after the Korean War, don't necessarily have the same consideration for the environment. And so this guy was dumping, I don't think he had a food shop. I think that was motor oil or something.
It was some.
Yeah. Oh, it was awful.
It was not
Yeah.
food grade.
Yeah. It was not food grade oil. And he just dumped it right in the drain. Okay. So I have added the chicken, added the water. Imagine that this is decorated in a medieval fashion instead of in the charming, sweet, modern Korean fashion. Okay, so we're just going to leave that go. Now, it doesn't actually say anything about adding salt at this stage. It does mention adding salt later. So we're going to go ahead and just take it at face value and assume that we are not supposed to add salt at this stage. Now comes the fun part. Now we get to bone a chicken. And not in the way some of you are probably going to take that. And then we're going to chop it into bits. Thankfully, I enjoy some good knife work, so this will be fine. I just wanted to show you, for those who actually don't know what pork belly looks like, you know, proto bacon, as we call it. Here's our pork belly. Unfortunately, the pork belly to which we had immediate access has already been sliced. You know, obviously, or not obviously, it actually smells like pork. Wow, that's weird. Pork that smells like pork. Well, I put it out so that it would reach room temperature, right? And of course, the thing is that when meats are refrigerated, they don't really have much of a smell unless they've gone bad. But this actually smells like pork. Anyway, I would have preferred this to be in a pork belly block, a brick of pork belly, but it comes pre-sliced because, you know, over here it's used a lot for barbecue, for Korean barbecue, as many of you would call it.
Probably could have gotten it, but it would have been.
It would have been the whole damn belly. Yeah. We don't want the whole belly,
which is awesome.
So you may have noticed that. Washing my hands after touching that. You may have noticed that again. There's zero. Other than taking one old hen and another raw hen. That is the only quantity in this whole thing. Otherwise, we're adding some amount of pork belly. We're adding some amount of ground cumin. We're adding some amount of cumin, saffron, wine, lard, salt, and egg yolks to the broth. And that's it. So the only quantity we have is the number of chickens that are used. Well, thank God for that, huh? At least we know that. I guess I should thank God for small favors in this case. So Swan Post's question is, pork belly looks like bacon. Is it the same thing? Bacon is generally, like 99% of the time, cured pork belly, right? It's been smoked, it's been cured in some way. So it is generally the pork belly, with the exception of rashers. I actually don't know which part of the pig or English rasher is made from.
That's a good question.
Yeah, in America, anyway. Pork bacon, the original, is nearly always pork belly. And actually, in, you know, if you go to Germany, that's what confuses a lot of people. Also, is that Speck just means, you know, it just means the pork belly. That's this part. You know, so if someone says shake your Speck, schüttel dein Speck. That actually means, you know, shake your belly, but also like shake your fat. Fat is Speck is another kind of euphemism for fat in German. Anyway, yeah. So this still has the rind on, and it doesn't say anything about removing the rind. So we're just going to leave it on. We're going for it, right? We're gonna take this at face value as much as possible. We'll see what happens. I may come to regret that choice. I may decide that we should have removed the rind, but rind will actually soften significantly depending on how long you boil it. That's another thing that's not mentioned at all. It doesn't say how long you should cook these in the broth. Presumably until they're done, or until it is good, as some of the recipes say. Oh, medieval recipes, you're so unhelpful in so many ways. I guess it's better than having to just base our medieval cookery on the remnants that are found inside of clay pots and whatnot. Interesting. Takeda says English bacon is back bacon. Aha. That's what I was, because I was realizing that it definitely, yeah, it looks more like the loin, right? Is it made from the loin, Takeda? Is that the part it's made from? It definitely, yeah, definitely doesn't have the same beautiful fat content of pork belly. Worship the fat, love the fat, embrace the fat. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started on our chicken. And again, I'm not certain whether we should be removing the skin or not. I still have time to think about that as we're working through it. So dismembering a chicken is actually, and I'm going to, as much as possible, I'm going to be using my actual replica 15th century knife. This is a knife by Todd Cutler. Again, not a channel sponsor. He's just got awesome stuff. Like this salt cellar is also Todd Cutler, this replica salt cellar. Beautiful, huh? The candle, this, try not to burn myself by getting wax on my hands. This medieval travel candlestick, also by Todd Cutler. So yeah, lots of good stuff by Todd. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this.
Is that from your kitchen set?
No, it's mine. I mean,
it's right
yeah,
here.
yeah. We do actually have. Oh man, we need to have these sharpened.
Very much so.
These poor things.
It's been a few years since we've treated them properly.
Yeah, these poor things. This poor thing has traveled all over the world. Literally, this knife has more frequent flyer miles on it than 90% of Americans. 95% of Americans, which is why my bags always get inspected, because this and its sister and its cousins and the eating in its sheath are always in my checked luggage, which always shows up on the scanner and always makes them go, oh God, what's that? Right. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able, this is probably not sharp enough. I actually, the honing steel that comes with it, the awl, is good for giving it an edge, but it's not good for resharpening it. So
Not what it's meant to do.
Not what it's meant to do. It's meant to help it keep an edge. And what's interesting about this chicken is that unlike American chickens, it still has its neck. So you can know what kind of thing it is. Yeah. So we should really, Handsome, you should be taking notes so that we can actually type up. Last week, I meant to take notes. I even had a notepad. It's right behind me, actually. I meant to take notes and note the quantities down that we were taking. And I got so wrapped up in the live stream that I didn't. But I have a condottiero here who could do that.
Good.
Yeah. And
It's bleeding, so no.
Did you say you're bleeding? Why are you bleeding? Oh, Handsome, 2 of my shoes I ended up missing in my cleaning and conditioning thing. Do you think you could do those?
Not from taking notes.
Oh, I mean, it's not, taking notes isn't going to be that long of standing on the process. So, for example, things like the wings, I don't know if I feel like dealing with the meat on the wings or not.
2 chickens.
Yeah, 2 chickens. One quote unquote old chicken. One young chicken. Yeah. I think I'm going to save the wings for making more stock somewhere else. I don't feel like
I have a lot of room in that pot.
Yeah, I guess I could. I guess I could go ahead and slice the skin off and dig it off with my fingers. Medieval people wouldn't have wasted anything. I will endeavor not to waste anything. I never ever understood the appeal of wings as a dish. It's just not my favorite thing. And especially not buffalo wings, which are made to be so hot that you want to give up on life. Oh God, I so need to sharpen this. Oh, this poor knife. That's what happens when other people wash your dishes for you. I know, the burden. It's real. The struggle is real. It's so hard to be a Contessa with retainers. Although none of them are here now, so should train some of them to actually sharpen my knife after they wash it and dump it in the sink with everyone else's knives, and then it gets all dull from being bandied about. I don't know if you all can hear the what actually sound like horror movie sounds.
So doesn't it?
It really does. This really does help, though. This process, just the process of removing raw meat from the bone, really does help you kind of already get it small. So there's that. So one of the things I really like about this recipe is it's a meatball recipe that does not require bread to glue it together. Of course, no meatballs require bread. By the way, if you think meatballs require bread in order to be meatballs, you would be mistaken. I've been making my meatballs bread product free for 12 years at this point, and we've come to the conclusion that we prefer meatballs with no bread in them because the flavors are not muddied by the bread. But also they're healthier, more nutritious. But I like this because it doesn't have bread in it, so I don't have to just modify it to match my dietary habits. It's already in line with my dietary habits. And because these make meatballs, you can chill them, make them before an event, whatever medieval event you're going to, and then you can actually take them with you in a larder, as we call coolers, using a more medieval lingo. And then you can actually, have finger food at your medieval event of choice, right? Or your LARP or your historical event. And then you have this authentic medieval dish that works really well as finger food. And it's delicious. I'm certain. Okay, I will admit I haven't made this before. I'm confident it's going to be super delicious. And I'm really excited about the egg thickened broth. And as I was walking on the river this morning, being assaulted by the driving rain, I had some thoughts about exactly how to do this broth to thicken it, because it actually, one of the key things about the language that it talks about when it talks about the broth, it says, add egg yolks to thicken it evenly. Evenly is a very key word here, because if you were to just add egg yolks straight to boiling broth, it's just going to make streaks of egg yolks. So I think there's a technique that's being assumed here, but not mentioned explicitly, and that is the technique of tempering. So when it comes time to add the egg yolks to this broth, I'm going to be tempering it first in a separate bowl. First off, I'm going to put the egg yolks through a strainer. Remember the strainer from last week? Yeah, I'm going to be putting the egg yolks through a strainer. And then I will then add some warm broth, a little bit of warm broth to the egg yolks that have been put through the strainer, mix that, and then add that slurry to the hot broth while stirring, which should create that nice, thick, evenly thickened broth that we're talking about. So this actually basically makes its own sauce. So that's really interesting to me, that it comes with this sauce that you can then either pack separately if you want to bring it with you to your event, or you can just save it later for something else if you don't want to bring the sauce to the event and you want it to be a completely unmessy finger food situation. Whatever you prefer. That's one of the reasons I really liked this recipe so much, was because it makes something that is portable, can be made in advance. You could probably freeze it actually, and it probably wouldn't impact it very much, because there's nothing in here that should be impacted by a freezing and thawing process. So yeah, you could actually make a large batch of these, freeze them before the event, and then take them out of the freezer, put them straight in the larder, go to the event, and let them defrost at the event. And then you don't even have to worry about ice necessarily, depending on the event and how warm it is exactly. Right. Yeah, got these nice fat deposits here. Don't fear the fat. We need to find a knife sharpener so badly.
Yeah.
Oh well, it's okay.
Literal truth.
It is the literal truth. See, we've achieved a boil over here. So I'm just going to
Fortunately, Takeda, the knife needs to be resharpened. It doesn't just need the edge realigned.
Oh yeah, no.
It's blunt at this point.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I can see little pieces missing from it, so it needs to be resharpened. It's
We have not cared for it well.
Well, it's not
many years.
Well, the problem is that traveling all over the world with it doesn't help. And of course, all the security agents pull it out of the sheath, they look at it, they don't put it back in with any kind of care. But probably the bigger problem is that when I'm at events, other people wash my dishes for me. And so the knife just gets tossed around, literally tossed around, and they don't carefully wash it and then dry it and then put it back in the sheath. They just set it on the drying rack to dry. And it gets bandied about with a bunch of other dishes as well. So it just gets dulled pretty badly. Yeah, it's okay. It's fine. I mean, if I cut myself, then that will just make this video go viral. All the sacrifices for the views. Spyderco makes a great, easy to use ceramic stick sharpener, easy to keep your kitchen knives keen. We actually have,
Responding to.
You're responding?
That's what I responded to when I said it actually needs to be resharpened.
Oh, okay.
The ceramic won't help, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so many of you don't know, but in my condotiero's past life, he used to sell knives, and he was a very good knife salesman.
It's fun.
Yeah. He was very good at getting people to buy knives they maybe didn't need.
Hey, they always needed the knife.
On the positive side, because the knife blade is a little dull, it's actually helping kind of grind the meat. It's helping shred the raw meat. So, it's okay. Oh, yeah. So some people have asked me, what would medieval people have done with leftovers? So if you're talking about cooking leftover, like it's food that's actually left over from, say, the Lord's table or a feast or a banquet, some such. Well, the servants would have gotten a chance to eat it, but many times they would actually take the leftovers from a feast, and they would actually go, there would be a kitchen door, basically, as if they were in a city, and the poor, the really poor, would actually know that they could go and get food from the feast table. So like every day there would be leftovers that would be handed out to the poor and the needy. So yeah, that's one of the uses for leftovers. In a middling sort, the house of the middling sort, if they had leftovers, it's highly unlikely they would. But if they did, would depend on the leftovers. There are recipes that literally use leftovers for things, and they'll actually say, and if you have pork, cooked pork about, then use it for this pie. You could actually bake it into a pie, an egg and cheese pie, for instance, if you have leftover meat. Lots of pie recipes, almost all pie recipes, meat pie recipes, call for cooked meat, not raw meat. In all the ones I've seen, they all, almost all of them, call for cooked meat, not raw meat. Which then begs the question, well, why even bother baking it into the pie? Well, you want the ingredients and the flavors to meld inside the pie. And on the subject of pies, most pie crusts, for your average pie crust in medieval cuisine isn't meant to be eaten. It's just a cooking vessel. So they didn't actually eat pies the way we would. They wouldn't slice it into a wedge. They'd actually take off the lid, the dough lid, and scoop out the insides and put it on the plate. It wouldn't be served, sliced up neatly like a pie. For most pies, many pies. Anyway, the later you get, the less common that is, the more you actually see recipes for take a fair crust, which implies that it's made with butter, and so it's actually edible, versus just a raised dough, raised pie crust, which is just flour, water, and salt, and will not result in something anyone really wants to eat, probably. Were there middle-class people? If so, could the middle class back then afford their own personal cook at home? So, it depends on what you mean by the middle class. The Middle Ages did not have quite, for most, and not a monolith. And the earlier you go, the smaller the differences are. The gap is between rich and poor. The later you go, the greater the gap is in between rich and poor. But also, the later you go in the Middle Ages, the more of a rising middle class you have that eventually actually takes over the aristocrats in terms of socioeconomic circumstances. So, by the 16th century, you have billionaires. By the 15th century, you have billionaires. Does anyone know the name Rothschild? Rothschild? Does anyone know the name Fugger? They are 15th century. They are 15th century billionaires, basically. By today's standards, they would be billionaires. So yeah, there's definitely a rising middle class as the Middle Ages wear on, and you've got your artisans, you've got your laborers. Peasants are actually not poor, not really very poor. They're actually pretty comfortable, many of them, especially by the 15th century. So yeah, there's definitely what you would recognize as a middle class, literally as a class of people with socioeconomic circumstances that are between rich and poor. And some of them definitely rise up to the point where they are richer than their so-called social betters. So yeah, that definitely is a thing. Could they afford that? When you say a personal cook, so I mean, yeah, it depends. And for example, in Florence, who evicted all of their aristocrats in the 14th century, by the way, there are technically no aristocrats left in 15th century Florence, technically. But many of those merchant families, of course, become very, very, very wealthy indeed. And so they have entire staffs. But you're talking about probably maybe a craftsman who does not own his own business. Could they afford to have a cook? Many of them could. Many of them could afford a cook, or they had a slave, which was also a thing in 15th century Florence, by the way. So yeah, many could afford a domestic servant or two, especially as you get later in the Middle Ages and the wealth kind of starts becoming more monetary instead of land-based. Yeah, that's a good thing about this knife being dull. It really is pulverizing this chicken.
Unexpected side benefit.
Unexpected side benefit of my knife being remarkably dull. Oh, goodness. Fantastic. So, in answer to your question of, well, how finely can you get chicken with a knife? Apparently, you can pulverize it.
If you're willing and you don't take care of your knives.
You just abuse the hell out of your knife, it becomes its own little mini meat grinder. Isn't that something? Some of you have asked about, in general, what do you do with the bones of the chicken like this? Well, I pop this in the freezer. I have a bowl in the freezer of leftover vegetable choppings, like the ends of carrots and that sort of thing, the roots of the celery. And I usually pop this in that same bowl in the freezer, and then I make chicken stock out of it altogether because, chicken stock is best if you have some meat on the bones too, because then you get that nice meaty flavor in your bone broth and not just sort of a musty, nasty flavor from just bones. Also, if you roast your bones before you make it into bone broth, it also helps with that musty flavor that you can otherwise, very unpleasant musty flavor that you can get in a bone broth, just in case those who don't know. You can, with the bottom of a plate, like in olden times. Yeah, Missy Juju, this is not, we're not at honing. We're beyond honing. This is, yeah. I mean, I actually have here, I will show you. I actually have a medieval honer. It comes with the knife. They always came together. People mistakenly think they're for eating. They're not. It's what people call a pricker. I will show you. I'll show you the pricker. Oh, and also we're going to turn this chicken. We're going to turn our old chicken. There we go. Okay. Yep. Cover that. Okay, great. Okay, let me show you the medieval knife honer that you actually find in the archaeological record. Right. So many of you think that if you get a knife set, and it's got one of these in it, that this is for eating. It is not. There is I've found zero evidence that such a tool was ever used for eating your food. Neither for securing the food for cutting, because food should be carved before it comes to the table, nor definitely not bringing the food to your mouth. This is a multi-tool. And you actually, blade is really dry. Actually, it's one of the things that can, one of the things you can do is actually hone your blade with it. Right? And it does help. It helps. It really does. But my blade needs a little more, it needs spa treatment. It needs knife spa treatment. Now, I've been very good about keeping my blade in good shape. I do keep it dried and oiled after washing. But I can literally see the chunks missing from this blade. Why are you making that face at me?
Because you're killing your blade.
Okay, well, come and show me how you do it. But there are chunks missing on this blade. Ah! My book stand.
To realign the blade.
Oh, Jason, thank you. I hope you're enjoying. Yeah, okay.
It should
Be less bad. Yeah. Yeah. We'll take it to a professional knife sharpener.
We do that too, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm getting hungry here just looking at raw chicken. That's not normal. You shouldn't get hungry looking at raw chicken. Although I have eaten raw chicken in Japan. I did try raw chicken. It was what you might call chicken sashimi. Although I don't know if that's what they called it in the place I went to. I will try most anything once if it's not immediately deadly. And I did. And it was.
And I did.
Yeah, let me just say I never have to do that again, ever. Not unless I am literally starving to death and there is no way to cook the chicken that I have found. I will not be ever doing that again. Raw chicken, definitely not a taste for me. It was definitely one of the worst things I've ever eaten. And I've had grilled squid sperm sack in Thailand at a street food. So that was possibly the worst thing I've ever eaten, to be honest. It was definitely not my favorite. So yeah, 0 out of 10 would not recommend on the raw chicken. Have any of you had raw chicken sashimi? Not my thing. Hello, Takeda. I love that you would come and maintain our cutlery for us.
It's fascinating what Missy said though about the bottom of the plate having a ceramic ring that you can use like a ceramic skill.
Do our plates have that?
Oh.
Yes, they do. I guess it does. I never thought about that. Huh. Interesting. You want to go and try and sharpen one of our knives using the ceramic ring? No?
My sharpening is not the best.
I can do it, but I've always been mediocre.
Actually, that honing did help. Actually.
Okay.
It's now cutting through the meat instead of pulverizing it. Although maybe that isn't going to help for our purposes. Maybe you've made this process harder than it needs to be.
Put it back.
Give me my dull blade back. Wait, let me just beat it on the table a little bit. That'll help. Clank it up against some of the other dishes randomly. And in case you all are wondering why I'm not trying to neatly debone this or remove the meat, because I don't want it to be neat. I want it to be as pulverized as possible. So I'm much less concerned with getting pretty chunks off of it, for certain. That's pretty cool. That's a pretty good tip, Missy Juju. So Missy Juju said, for those who can't see the live chat for whatever reason, she actually said that on the bottom are ceramic plates. There is a ring, and I just looked at the ceramic plates behind me. Yes, there is. And you can actually use it like a ceramic sharpener by honing the edge of your knife against it. So yeah. That's very interesting. Takeda, have you ever used the ring on the bottom of the ceramic plate to, for sharpening purposes? That's really fascinating. And again, this is often the kind of assumed knowledge that medieval recipe collections just assume you have, but of course you don't necessarily, because it's common knowledge for the era, and if you don't live in the era, then there it goes. Yeah, that is pretty neat. Okay, I'm pretty certain this is done. I'm just going to give it the temperature check. And no, thermometers are not medieval. They are not. And I could just check it by sticking a knife in it to see how tender it is too. But, I did say medieval cooking in a modern kitchen. So, but if I'm cooking actually cooking in a medieval setup, and obviously therefore not using meat thermometers, I would do a knife test. If you insert a knife, or even better yet, your awl into your chicken, and you insert it in deeply, and you pull it out, if the juices come out clear, it's cooked. If the juices don't come out clear, it's not cooked. Cook it longer. And the juices will boil out just because of the way heat goes. That was not yet up to temperature. But honestly, we want this to cook for a little while anyway, because we really want to extract as much flavor from it as possible. Okay, question from Swanpuss, another excellent question. Was chicken the most popular meat back then? I'd assume beef was harder to get because of taking care of cows would be more expensive than chickens. Yeah, beef was definitely a much more luxurious item, and also most people only slaughtered a cow once a year at the end of the season before the winter is when excess animals would be slaughtered, and their meat would be salted and preserved in some or salted preserved in some other sort of way to go through the winter, because you don't, especially male cows, especially excess bulls and or oxen, right? Who aren't your plow oxen, right? So there, with the exception of great banquets and feasts, yeah, you wouldn't just, your average person wouldn't go out and slaughter their cow just any time of the season. So yeah, beef was definitely more rare. Certainly there are lots of chicken recipes. So chicken was certainly a common meat. Eggs were probably the staple of the medieval diet, honestly, for protein. Chicken is common, but again, you don't want to be slaughtering your chickens all the time. So yeah, meat was something. There's statutes actually from various parts of Europe that talk about the food to which workers should have access. So these are like labor laws, right? So they actually talk about, I'm trying to think what it was specifically. It was in the statutes, the sumptuary laws of Edward II and Edward III talk about, I know this is an example I don't remember offhand, but chandlers should get one meal of meat a day, for instance. So even at the craftsman level, the sort of labor level, they're actually stipulating that, their employers they are entitled to one meat meal a day. But also there's something, the other part that's unspoken about that is they're not supposed to get more than one meal of meat a day because it's supposed to control consumption, which apparently by the end of the 13th century and into the 14th century was starting to get out of hand across various classes of English society. But chicken certainly does seem like it would be a more popular meat, or more common meat. Popular is maybe the wrong word. Common, because chickens reproduce quickly and grow quickly, and yeah, unlike a cow, which does not reproduce quickly and does not grow quickly. Fish, yes. So can I talk about fish? Yeah. So for many people who forget, many reenactors, especially in the United States, forget that the Middle Ages most of Europe, the Middle East, was a time of deep faith, deep religious practice across whether it was Judaism, Islam, or Christianity. And so Christians were still very much living by a very strict calendar of consumption based on whether it was a Lenten day or an Ember day. And those are days when you were not supposed to eat meat, and also you were generally supposed to avoid most animal products. more like a vegan diet. And so fish, of course, on those days, except vegan, but plus fish. So on those days, fish is what people ate. So there are many, many, many days throughout the year where people were only supposed to be eating, I mean, vegetables, but in terms of the protein, it was fish. So there are hundreds upon hundreds of recipes for fish, roasted, stewed, boiled, fried. Yeah, lots. And eels. Eel was particularly popular and also was considered a higher end item, right? So eel was also a big deal in medieval cuisine. But basically the fish dishes nearly always have the same flavorings as the meat dishes. So still all these amazing spices, cinnamon, cubebs, ginger, nutmeg, grains of paradise. So you're still cumin, you're still coriander, you're still getting all of these amazing spicings, but it's just fish instead of the meat. And very often the recipe will say, beef bruet. And then at the very end of the recipe will say, and if it's a fish day, just substitute fish. So yeah, fish was definitely very common, and it was a going concern. They had fish ponds. They literally had fish breeding ponds, stock ponds, just like we have today, especially inland. Although not necessarily for ocean-going fish. Ocean-going fish inland would have absolutely been a luxury, although they did still manage to bring fish in from the ocean into inland markets in various places across Europe. So, but depending on where you were, you'd probably more likely to have access to freshwater fish than saltwater fish if you're living inland. And so there's lots of trout and I mean, I'm not much of a fish person, and I'll admit that often when I'm reading these recipes, I don't even know what some of these fish look like. But the variety, the diversity of not just fish actually, but also birds that medieval people ate versus what we eat now, the diversity of animal parts that they ate versus what we eat now is pretty breathtaking. They ate cranes, they ate swans, they ate herons, ducks and geese, obviously. Let me see, what other waterfowl did they eat that I would never look at and think I'm going to go eat me that.
More hens.
Oh yeah. Fen hens, of course, songbirds of all kinds, pigeons, doves, so many more, so many more birds were eaten too. There's a lot of medieval recipes that call for organ meat, of course, as well, sweetbreads. So it was definitely a more diverse diet than what we eat now. And
I didn't even know organs had meat. Organs?
oh, okay.
That was funny.
Yeah, so yeah, fish, big part of the medieval diet. Wednesdays and Fridays were ember days, which meant those were days that you were supposed to fast, which that meant no meat. Of course, then various times and places throughout the Middle Ages, then certain items got redefined as being fish because they resided in water, like beaver. Beaver counted as fish because it's a water animal. It's like, okay, talk about living by the letter of the law, not the spirit of the law. Porpoise, right? Porpoise, yeah. So it's just people often don't realize how common it was that it would be a day when you were not only were you not supposed to eat meat, but then you didn't eat meat, which actually might be better if we went back to that, although we're already suffering from overfishing, so maybe not.
Muskrat.
Yeah, muskrat, nutria. Yeah, there's a lot of things were eaten then that just aren't eaten now, and eaten at an official level. Not just oh my gosh, we're on a siege, we now have to eat that. No. That's not siege food. That's dinner on any given day. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that medieval people ate, I don't like. Organs specifically, liver, kidneys, gizzards. No, thank you. Just no. Do any of you actually like gizzards? No. Just no.
Porcelain works best, honestly. The barnacle goose.
Oh, yeah, you mean as counting as a fish because it lives in the water? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the barnacle goose definitely did get redefined as meat because it's a waterfowl.
Oh, yeah. Swan processor. Another good question.
Hmm.
Was fat from animals used for things that had nothing to do with food?
Oh, yes, good question. So tallow, so believe it or not, before the industrial era, the latest industrial revolution, animal fat was used for everything that now these synthetic greases are used for. So tallow was used to grease axles and wheels, for instance. Especially tallow. I haven't seen lard so much, but could also be used in weaving to goose fat. Goose fat was often used in certain kinds of weaving to actually allow the yarns to not fray, and then it was washed out. It was laundered out afterwards, after the weaving was done. Skincare products, duck fat, tallow, lard.
Cosmetica.
Yeah. In fact, if you would actually like to try out some non-toxic, yet wonderful medieval and Renaissance and even ancient skincare products, Cosmetica Obscura. We interviewed them at Penzic and went through we went through their shop and got an amazing tour of their products. All of their products, the base fats, many of the base fats are animal fats like tallow or duck fat. So yeah, you can try to see how luscious that feels. It really does feel amazingly luscious. So yeah, there's definitely lots of uses for animal fats that are non-food grade, non-food rated. But the as far as I can tell, the tallow that would have been used in the kitchen is the same as the tallow that would have been used as axle grease. Also, we talked about rush lights in my medieval sewing party live stream earlier. Rush lights are literally made from the fibrous core of a reed of a river rush, and tallow was the accelerant, was the fat in which they were soaked to actually set them on fire, so they would actually burn. So yeah, that also means, and there were candles actually that were also made from tallow. So a tallow candle is not going to burn as brightly as a beeswax candle. It's also not going to burn as cleanly. It's going to smoke and spatter, and it will also smell. It might not smell bad though. It might smell kind of beefy, which if you don't mind your house smelling beefy, might be okay.
Couple comments.
I mean, I will agree. You are right. Skin is an organ. I meant so I should have said internal organs. I agree with you that skin is an organ and it is the best part. 100%. 100% agree with that. Yep. It is definitely a best part of the chicken. I love crispy chicken skins. For those who don't know, you can actually, this is not a medieval practice because baking soda is not medieval. You can actually rub your chicken skins in a very light coating of baking soda and then roast them in the oven, and they'll turn into yummy chicken skin chips. Super yum. Crispy chicken skin chips. The baking soda actually makes it crispy instead of just kind of, well, whatever. Okay. Wow, this looks kind of gruesome now.
Used as anti-wrinkle cream. Pork skin is full of vitamin E and used as anti-wrinkle cream.
Yeah, pork fat. Yeah, I love pork fat. Love pork fat. Yep. And yeah, it's very lush on your skin. So Cosmetica Obscura actually has a bunch of cosmetic items, medieval, Renaissance, and even some ancient recipes for skin creams and whatnot made with all of those. And yeah, they feel super lush on the skin. Really soft, really nice soft skin. Okay, well, we now have our pile of meat. And now I'm going to take this pile of meat and I'm going to dice it finely. As the recipe says, chop it finely. So I'm going to do that, but I'm going to first take these bones and I'm just going to pop them in the freezer for now, and I will turn them into broth later. And again, I didn't work too hard to get all of the little pieces of meat off because I do prefer a chicken stock that is meaty. So I'm just going to leave that on there for making the chicken stock. I need to reorganize this fridge. Okay, so now we're going to now chop this finely. I'm going to go ahead and see how our old hen is doing. Our not old hen. Give it a turn. I'm also going to add some more water to this. It's boiled down quite a bit, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and add some more water to that. Okay, and now let the finely chopping begin. Let's see, other uses that I know for animal fats in the Middle Ages, non-food related. This knife is dull as hell too. This is one of my favorite knives because it's got this lovely olive wood handle, but other uses for animal fats, non-food related. I feel like I might have gone through all of them. I don't actually have any, I haven't found any evidence anyway of medieval, in Western Europe anyway, of using animal fats for hair per se. Yeah, I haven't actually found that. So I'm not certain if it ever would have been used to condition the hair. I will say likely not though, because the reality is now that I've been following a more medieval hair care routine, and have given up on all the chemical additions, whether natural chemicals or otherwise, and I'm just basically using the natural oils from my scalp to just, condition my hair by combing it with a nice medieval wooden comb. I'm finding I don't actually need the conditioners. So I feel like it's very likely that medieval people also having a form of hair care that would have been more in line with just sort of what their hair is supposed to do probably might not have actually needed conditioners as much. Leather treatments, yes. Thank you, Litz Plumber. Yes, leather treatments for certain. I do know that there's other kinds of oils, but I do remember reading in one of the sources, olive oil is used for harness, but that's probably the metal. I did read tallow being used for tack for the leather parts. Yeah, good one. Back then, would people ever try to dye their hair? Absolutely. Absolutely. Dyeing hair is absolutely a medieval thing. And there are recipes in the Trotula at the very least. And also then there's a late 15th century composition by Caterina Sforza. And I think there's some hair dye treatments in there. And then in the 16th century in Italy, there's another manual that has lots of hair dyeing. So they actually had ways to both bleach their hair so that it would be blonde, which was the desirable color, by the way. And they also had ways to turn their hair black. They used walnuts to turn their hair black, ground walnuts to turn their hair black. So yeah, they absolutely could and did dye their hair. And there are diatribes by priests, various priests, preachers like San Bernardino, who literally rail against turning their hair unnatural colors, either by use of potions, I think he calls them, or by using false hair that is not your natural color, right? And the ancient Romans did too. The Egyptians did. Yeah, we know that hair dyeing is something that dates back a long time. You can also use henna to dye hair, although I haven't seen any evidence of henna being used in the Christian parts of Europe. I think there's some evidence of henna possibly being used in the Iberian Peninsula, but don't hold me to that. So Missy Jew, I already did a video on medieval hair care. Actually at Pennsic, I did a live stream demonstrating the hair washing process and talking about how to do that and about the combing process. And also in my almost all of my getting dressed videos these days, my medieval sewing parties where I start off by getting dressed, I actually I comb my hair and talk about how to do that. But yeah, if you want to see what medieval hair washing would have been like actual wet washing, there's a video from about 6 weeks ago at this point. I demonstrated it in my beautiful medieval pavilion at Pennsic from beginning to end, the process of washing your hair. Yeah. Speaking of videos, I am moving mostly away from polished edited videos, because polished and edited videos take a lot of time, and I get almost no money for these videos. I really get almost nothing. You know, a 15 to 20 minute polished and edited video is like 100 hours of work. It really is. When you talk about the research, the scripting, filming, editing, adding visuals, finding and adding the appropriate visuals, adding music, putting it all together, post-production. One of my videos, because I believe in quality and quality of information, quality of production values, one of my videos takes at least 50 hours at a minimum, but usually 100. And so I am moving towards a more pure live video format. And in which case, I think I was actually thinking of doing a live stream that is just dedicated to medieval hair care and medieval styling. So I will do a live stream of that. Now, that being said, I have also thought that if people would actually I was thinking of doing a GoFundMe, because I have like 11 patrons and maybe 11 channel members. So my earnings from Patreon and YouTube are like maybe $300 a month. It's not a lot. So yeah, I was thinking of actually moving to a GoFundMe format for people who would like to help support specific video projects, specific video essays. So for instance, if you would like to see a narrated a getting dressed video that is narrated the way the Burgundian getting dressed video is narrated from my 15th century in persona perspective, and you'd like to see that for my 15th century Italian stuff, then you could decide to help fund that. I am thinking of switching to GoFundMe specifically for specific polished, finished video projects, because YouTube pays me nothing. YouTube doesn't know what to do with my non-live stream videos. It's figured out what to do with my live stream videos, many of you are watching now, but it just doesn't know what to do with my wonderful video essays that so many of you really do love. So I am thinking of moving to GoFundMe and see if anyone wants to actually, if there's any particular video project you'd like to really see come to fruition that's not a live stream but a finished video project. Yeah, I think we're probably going to see if there's actually enough interest to get it going. But it would take a lot of money to make me want to do one of these videos, because like I said, 100 hours is a lot. So we'll see. Oh, thank you, Swan Puss. Yeah. Oh no, Missy Juju, no apologies. No. It's a good reminder. Like I do a lot of live streaming now. So it's totally cool. So no, thank you for asking whether we have the video. We do. I have a video, but it's specifically focusing on the hair washing. So I think it's not a bad thing actually if we do a separate live stream that's about the hair care aspect, right? That's about not the combing and then the hair styling, and we can actually demonstrate several different kinds of coiffures that are appropriate for the 15th century, for instance. No, please don't apologize. No, never apologize for asking if I have a video on something. The answer is probably yes at this point. I've been doing this now for over 5 years. The answer is likely yes. Oh, Swan Puss, I really appreciate that compliment. But yeah, for those who don't know, on my YouTube channel, I have a lot of polished, nicely edited, scripted content also, which is different. It's different, but I think it's also as fun. It's also fun. It's just differently fun. My wit still shines through. My acerbic sense of humor still shines through. And it allows me to provide a little more accurate information, because I'm actually, I've researched it and scripted it instead of just pulling it out of my memory banks like I do in these live streams. So yeah. And this is turning into a nice mushy kind of situation, so that's good. I tell you, there is something, I like knife work because it's very trance-like. It's very meditative, very relaxing. I actually enjoy just medieval food processing, I guess you would call it. I enjoy working with the mortar and pestle, and we're going to get to work with the mortar and pestle this evening because we have cumin that we have to grind. So yeah, you're going to get to see, for those of you who don't know how to use a mortar and pestle, you will get to see that in action. And if we actually get through this recipe and I still have the mental wherewithal to do the second thing I plan to do, then you'll also get to see grinding almonds and turning almonds into almond milk using medieval implements, which is different than when using a food processor. But I'm really thinking I'm going to do I might do a separate, maybe next week in our medieval cooking show, we'll dedicate it to almonds, to almond dishes, because there's a lot of almond dishes. On Lenten days, they would use almond milk or almond cream or almond butter in place of these animal products, in place of butter and cream and milk. So there's a lot of recipes in medieval cookbooks that call for almonds. And this cookbook, actually, this collection, this 35 recipe collection, actually has quite a few almond recipes, considering it's only 35 recipes total. Yeah. What are we making today? Fish, thank you for subbing. Appreciate that. Nemja, if that's how that's pronounced. We are making chicken dumplings, Hühnerkloten, as they're called in the original Low German. And these are basically, they're chicken meatballs. They're spiced and they're cooked in a rich chicken broth that contains wine, saffron, cumin, and extra fat and yolks to thicken it. So right now we're just working on, we have removed the chicken from the large portion of the meat from the bones of the chicken, and we are now using a knife to do the equivalent of grind it. We're basically turning into chicken mush. And as you can see, it's actually doing a pretty good job of creating a mass that will absolutely cohere together as meatballs. All right, and I'll show you my chicken cleaver. And unfortunately, I didn't think to look at it before this live stream. This is a Korean chicken cleaver. Try not to get all that hair, kitty hair that's all over it. I need to clean it, but this would turn this chicken into, yeah, but it needs to be cleaned and oiled and so I thought I had already done that, but I pulled it out like 10 minutes before this went to go live and I realized I hadn't. So there it is. Thank you, Nemja. Appreciate that. So one of the reasons for those who are just joining, please like and subscribe, of course. But those who are just joining, one of the reasons this recipe caught my attention is, one, I haven't seen a recipe exactly like this in any of the other recipe collections at which I've looked, that I've examined. Two, this would make a great dish that would be finger food for an event or even a picnic or a hike even. And you can make it in large quantities beforehand, freeze it, and then have it available to take with you to your medieval or LARP event of choice and have a nutritionally dense, tasty, easy to deal with food on hand, minimal fuss, minimal muss. I mean, as someone who likes to cook in large quantities and then freeze portions of it so I can just pull it out whenever I need it, that really sings to my soul. Okay, so it does say, the recipe says, chop it finely. This looks pretty finely. I'm seeing a couple of chunks still. I'm going to just try to get those, but really the chicken, it doesn't, the chicken breast, of course, is the part that's sort of fighting me. And then there's some of the more the sinewy spots that are also, I'm trying, I probably should have removed the silver skin on those, honestly, that's on me. Yeah, I might, it doesn't, that's the other thing. So the recipe doesn't say anything about removing silver skin. For those who don't know what silver skin is, it's connective tissue and it literally looks like skin that is silver. That is silver skin. Right, and that is the stuff that takes a very long time to actually soften and cook, and that's what will get stuck in your teeth. So even though the recipe says nothing about removing the silver skin, I'm going to remove it when I see it because I just don't want to have to fight with that. There is nothing worse than when you bite into a meatball and you get a piece of silver skin that then wraps itself around a tooth. Am I the only one who's had that horrifying experience? Ugh. Or even floss won't get it out. Yeah. No, thank you. So yeah, you should generally remove silver skin when you see it, even though this recipe didn't call for that. And I honestly, I got talking to you all and I kind of lost focus a little bit. I recommend removing silver skin before you chop your meat into a pulp. Note to self. Of course, unfortunately, my secretary retired. Did you go to sleep, handsome? I'm going to take that as a yes. He didn't respond. In the medieval era, did they deep fry food? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, they did. They oil fried food all the time. Now, was it a deep fryer like we would have understood it? No, but they would put oil in a pot and they would heat it up and they would dump things in it. They were particularly fond of fried dough. Lots and lots and lots and lots of recipes for fritters of various kinds, whether the dough is filled or not. Lots of recipes for fried dough. Medieval people loved their fried food. They also had shallow fried food. Yeah, they definitely did do deep frying. It is a thing. It was absolutely a thing. Okay, I'm going to call that good. It smells so nice and meaty, the boiled chicken over here. Yeah. Okay, so now I am going to take some of this chicken skin and cut it up into the meat, or cut it up and then mix it into the meat. Chicken skin, unfortunately, when it's raw, is not as bittable as raw meat is. So that's why I'm cutting it separately. Yeah, lots of deep fried food. Lots of different kinds of deep fried dough, fritters filled with fruit, with cream, or with a creamy filling. And sometimes the fritters did have a combination of meat, like chopped meat and raisins and stuff in them. So yeah, it was definitely a common way to cook things. 100%. More common, honestly, than baking, because not everyone had an oven. In fact, castles had ovens. Some palazzi had ovens in Florence, for instance, but usually the oven was actually in a separate yard somewhere. Their oven was. Most homes just didn't have ovens. They had hearths, but not an oven. Ovens were they were owned and operated by bakers. That was what a baker did. They had an oven that people would actually pay to use. So honestly, it was likely more common for the average person to fry dough than to bake dough, with the exception of bread, which they would take to the baker to be baked. And their bread would be marked in some way to indicate that it was theirs. But funny thing about bread in being baked by the bakers would often actually get caught stealing dough from the loaves that they were supposed to bake. So they would take just a little bit from each loaf and then make their own loaves that they could either then eat themselves or sell. And so the authorities in many cities had to crack down on these scamster bakers, these scammer bakers. They actually had to punish them and fine them, and come up with ways to ensure the integrity of these loaves that people were paying them to bake. By the way, the bakers weren't doing people a favor. You actually had to pay to have your bread baked in their oven. Did they care back then about eating healthy or just ate whatever? Okay, so yes, absolutely. Historically, people always seem to have cared about eating healthy. But what counted is eating healthy. So they historically, most societies have had some sort of scientific foundation for their dietary choices. It's just that their scientific foundation for their dietary choices might not be recognized by our scientific foundation as being healthy. So in the Middle Ages, it was all based on the humors, right? It was based on the four humors. It was based on temperament. And so, that's how they decided what was healthy and what was not. Are you balancing between hot and cold, wet and dry, choleric, biliac, right? Are you, what is going on? That's how generally what was acknowledged as being healthy was eating foods that balanced the humors. So yeah, they did focus on eating healthy. Unfortunately, their version, what they thought was healthy is not necessarily was. For instance, they thought that sugar was medicinal. Yeah, you heard me right. They thought that refined cane sugar was medicinal. So yes, yes, they did care about eating healthy, at least especially in the upper echelons. You know, a lot of people, the people at the lower end, though, and especially during times of famine, they were just concerned about, yeah, surviving. But honestly, for much of the Middle Ages, you know, everyone cared about being so-called healthy. It's just what they thought of as healthy is not necessarily what we think of as healthy. And God knows, you know, the rich, I mentioned this earlier, the wealthy people were eating white bread with nothing, just white flour, sourdough, but still just white flour with all the bran sifted out. So none of those micronutrients. Okay, so here we go. Our chicken is chopped finely, and I have also chopped the meat as finely as I care for it to be chopped at any rate to mix that in. And now we are actually going to go ahead and put this in a bowl because it says mix it with bacon diced as small as peas and ground cumin. So I'm going to go ahead and scrape this into a bowl. Again, it doesn't say to put it in a bowl, but I'm going to put it in a bowl. I'm washing my hands here. And a medieval kitchen absolutely had a sink, especially in a great house. They had a sink, and they were often stone, actually. And they were big on washing hands. There's lots of instructions all the time about washing hands. I thought I was checking whether you were awake or asleep. You should go to sleep, Hanson. Just do your ablutions, go to bed. Jet lag and all that. Okay.
And I thought I was immune.
You are not. Okay, next we are going to dice our pork belly, our so-called bacon, right? Okay. So as I mentioned, it doesn't say whether you should leave the rind on or not. This is another thing we have to consider. I'm going to go ahead and leave the rind on, and we'll see what happens. Yep, we'll see what happens. So, question: when it's that time of the month, the wife, chocolate and sugar is medicinal and mandatory for my health as well as hers. At least that's what she tells me. Yeah. Yeah. They also use sugar to brush their teeth. Not awesome. Not good. So the thing about boiling this chicken is that it's going to remove, so the chicken that's boiling here, right? For those who are just joining, we're actually making a stock behind us while we prepare the other ingredients for the dumplings, the cloten. And the thing about boiling the chicken whole, especially, is that it's going to melt a lot of that collagen out of the chicken and into the broth. So this broth that we're making is going to be really rich and silky. It's going to be super yum because the broth will then turn into this thickened sauce. So I'm really excited to see how this tastes all together because we're going to have these yummy chicken dumplings, which will have pork belly in them and cumin. And it doesn't actually say salt, but we're going to go ahead and add some salt. Although the broth has salt. Maybe they're hoping the salt will absorb into it. Okay, consensus. Do you think we should go ahead and add salt into the dumplings in the raw meat, or should we go ahead and live on the edge and see if the salt that we add to the broth will actually cook into the dumplings as they're cooking? I'm actually kind of leaning towards that just to see if that actually works. Yeah, so we are making Hunnerkloten. This is a 13th century chicken dumpling dish that comes from a series of Northern European cookbooks that are some of the earliest cookbooks we have from Europe post-antiquity, actual proper recipe collections that we have from Europe. And this consists of the meatballs, the dumplings, so to say. They actually consist of raw chicken meat, mixed with pea-sized pork belly, and then some ground cumin, and then that is basically cooked in this broth that we're making behind us here. And the broth will actually contain, once the broth is actually fully fledged, it will have cumin and saffron and wine, lard, salt, and thickened with egg yolk. So it will be quite flavorful in and of itself. So that is what we are currently making. We're working right now on preparing the pork belly, which is erroneously, or I say deceptively, translated as bacon, even though in the modern English and modern cultural context, most people hear bacon and they think it must be cured. But there's actually there's no implication that it is necessarily a cured pork belly here. None at all, actually. And one of them just says pork, not even pork belly. So not even Speck, it just says pork. Schweinefleisch. So yeah, unlikely then that it is cured in any kind of way. Not impossible, but I think a lot of people, unfortunately, they get really excited and they think that medieval bacon was just like modern bacon. It is not. And just because a translated recipe says to use bacon doesn't mean it's the kind of bacon you're thinking of. This bacon is not salted at all. This is pork belly. It's just pork belly. In Italy, we always salt the filling as well as the broth. Yeah, and I do too, but you know, I'm trying. I definitely salt the filling as well as the broth, but I'm really feeling like, because it specifies salt in the broth, but it doesn't specify it in the dumplings, that for the sake of experimentation, we should really try to stick to that, because it is capable of specifying that we should add salt at some point, and see what that does. And it also says that these dumplings shouldn't be large. And that would actually make it more likely that the salt will actually, through osmosis, work its way into the dumplings, is my thought anyway. But yeah, Ludovica, absolutely 100%. I would myself salt the filling as well as the broth. Yeah, that's just me though. Yeah, so this, he'll live on the edge, yeah. So this so again, bacon is not translated in a way that most people would understand, and that's why I really don't like them using the word bacon, because in a lot of especially in the older Germanic languages, nowadays they use the word for pork belly for what we understand as cured bacon, but historically it just meant pork belly, and yet they still translate it as bacon, whereas they really just mean pork belly. They don't mean cured pork belly. They just mean pork belly. So there is no curing here. It's not smoked. It's not salted in any way. Yeah. So it does say that the pork belly should be pea-sized. So we're working on making it pea-sized as uniformly as possible. That would have been easier if it hadn't come pre-sliced, but unfortunately, to get unpre-sliced pork belly, I would have had to buy the whole damn belly. And we're leaving in less than a week to go on a 14-day Mediterranean voyage on Queen Victoria, so I didn't want to get a whole pork belly and just literally spend every day, all day, 3 meals a day eating pork belly until we leave. Yeah, I would definitely normally salt the filling too. I'm just kind of, for the sake of, maybe seeing if the recipe means it. If the recipe really means you don't need to salt it because it comes through in the cooking process. Part of me is leaning more towards that. But normally I would definitely salt both. Yeah, so this recipe, for those who are tuning in, weren't there at the beginning when we talked about this. Like many medieval recipes, this recipe for Hunnerkloten says nothing about quantities or size, except for 3 exact quantities. Boil 1 old hen, take 1 other hen, and then, of course, the size of the bacon, it should be diced as small as peas. Now, to get a really good idea, we'd have to look and see how big medieval peas were and whether they were the same size as the ones we have now. And I will admit, I didn't bother to look into that before we started this. Normally I do, to see if I can get an idea of whether the common medieval garden peas were the same size as they are now, or if they were smaller. It tends to be smaller. The medieval cultivars of most vegetables tend to be smaller than their modern cultivars, because we've bred them to be monstrous versions of their original selves for the sake of food production and also profit. So yeah, I should have, ideally, to be really faithful to the redaction process, I would hope to actually see if I can find out how heirloom medieval peas would have looked. Swan, I will still be live streaming. I will absolutely still be live streaming. Do not worry. We're going to be live streaming a tour of the Gothic Quarter in Barcelona in Medieval Kit. And of course, I will be live streaming our adventures on my Travels with the Creative Contessa channel. So if you want to actually see the travel side of my life, check out Travels with the Creative Contessa. Will be lots of live streaming there. But when we hit sites that are of particular historic import, and we're doing a historic focused thing, we'll probably live stream on both channels. So don't worry, there will still be live streams. And I'll probably be doing some medieval sewing parties from aboard the cruise ship, because why not? Why not? What is life without some medieval sewing parties on an glorious Art Deco paean to the golden era of cruising? How are these dumplings different from pelmeni? You've used a word with which I'm not familiar. I am not familiar with pelmeni. So I will tell you what's in these, and you can tell me maybe. It's meat that's been knife ground, basically, mixed with uncured pork belly, with some cumin, and then that is cooked in a broth that is flavored with cumin, saffron, wine, lard, salt, and egg yolks. So how different is that from pelmeni, I guess, is the question. Yeah. That is a very important question. Okay, I'm going to call this good enough. Because if I could literally be all day picking out individual pieces and seeing if they actually meet the P standard, as it were. So actually, I brought this up to room temperature because ideally meat should be sort of room temperature before you put it in water or whatever. But and this is a trick they wouldn't have had in the Middle Ages in most places except in the wintertime. Pork belly is way easier to cut if it comes out of the freezer because then all the fat is stiff and it slices much better. So trick for modern kitchens is that in all meat is easier to cut and slice if it's semi-frozen, right? So if you know you're going to be slicing or cutting meat and it's already defrosted, pop it back in the freezer for like an hour usually before you're going to actually cut it, and then it will be just the right temperature to actually slice easily. Because once it gets warm, or well, once it gets, once it's no longer stiff, then it's actually almost too malleable to cut. It's easier to cut it when it's frozen. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and mix these together. That chicken broth smells so good. Scrape this in, and you'll note I'm not using the blade side of my knife to scrape. I'm using the flat side. So I'm not dulling the blade of my knife by scraping it on the cutting board. I'm using the flat side as the scraper, as the bench scraper, as it were. Okay, go ahead and move this over to here. Next, it says we need to add some ground cumin. So we're now going to get to witness the joy of the mortar and pestle. Wash my hands again. Medieval people wash their hands on a regular basis, and there's no reason to think that they wouldn't have done so in the kitchen as well. Unlike modern myths, medieval Europe, across medieval Europe, there are many, many direct indications, including actual manners, books of manners, talking about keeping clean, washing your hands, washing your face on a pretty regular basis. Okay, so for those who don't know, this is what cumin seed looks like. Cumin looks like as the seed part of the plant. By the way, depending on the language you're speaking, you need to make certain that it's cumin and not fennel. Yeah, because they look the same, and you don't want to get them mixed up because they have a completely different flavor profile, right? So I'm actually going to take some of this because the recipe actually calls for ground cumin in the meatballs. It specifies ground, but then in the broth, it says just cumin. So I actually think that might be intentional. I think in the broth, we're supposed to use cumin seed because that's actually more common when you're making a broth or a sauce that use cumin seed, especially if you're going to boil it. And then in the meatballs itself, for better distribution, well, for distribution at all, you're using ground cumin. So this is a mortar and pestle. This is the medieval food processor, pestle, mortar. And the medieval versions for especially for industrial kitchens were big, very big, with a very, very long pestle. You would actually stand while you did it. And so it would be actually pretty easy to process spices using one of these medieval mortars and pestles. So yeah, but this one is made of granite, and it actually goes pretty quickly. It's pretty, I really love this thing. I don't have any evidence directly of stone mortars and pestles. I have seen in inventories and or expense accounts, I have seen brass or bronze mortars and pestles, and I have seen wooden ones. I have not seen evidence of stone ones in, say, 15th century Europe. So if you have evidence of stone mortars and pestles in medieval Europe, I would be very interested and keen to hear that. As you see, it doesn't take long. And there's a difference in the kind of flavors that you're going to get out of hand ground spices in a mortar and pestle than if you put it in a spice grinder or a coffee grinder. Those blades are going to go way faster. They're going to get way hotter, and they're metal. And so you actually could cause some of the delicate fatty acids in your seeds to actually go rancid, thereby creating an inflammatory concoction. But you're also just going to get a different flavor profile, therefore. Oh, it smells so lovely. I grew up without, my mom hates cumin. So I grew up without cumin, basically, and I didn't used to like it when I was little, but I've definitely developed a taste for cumin since then. It's good because I love Indian cuisine. I love Mesoamerican cuisine, and I love medieval cuisine. So it would be a very sad world. Persian cuisine, African cuisine, Middle Eastern cuisine. Yeah, my world would be very sad if I didn't like cumin. Very sad indeed. Now, so, one of the things about this recipe, again, no quantities. How much cumin? None of the three versions of this recipe say. So I'm just kind of making a call here that maybe this isn't an overpowering dish, and also that spices are super precious and expensive. And so maybe I'm not going to dump $100 worth of cumin, converting to the modern values, into these. So this is about the amount of cumin that kind of goes into other dishes. It's about half a teaspoon that goes into that other kind of meatball dishes or meat patty dishes, say from Turkey, in the modern world, for about this amount of meat. So we're going to go with this. We're going to go with about what would be about half a teaspoon. And I always use a brush to get the rest of the spices out of my mortar and pestle so nothing gets wasted. If I don't have a liquid that I'm adding to the dish. If there's a liquid that's going to get added, I actually put the liquid in here, slurry it around, and then toss the liquid in. It's another good way to get those oils, for instance, that are now inside the mortar. Okay, so that's about half a teaspoon of ground cumin. Obviously, you could definitely use pre-ground cumin. The problem with pre-ground spices is that they lose their potency really quickly. The second you break the seed open, you're exposing all of the essential oils, all of the fatty acids to oxygen. They will oxidate, and they will just lose their potency and or go rancid actually over time. So it's best if you have the luxury of doing so, of buying your spices whole and grinding them as you need them. I understand that in the modern world, many of us live way too quickly and way too tightly to allow for that kind of luxury. But if you can, I do recommend it. In a medieval kitchen, as we found out through a medieval storytime reading this week, the medieval kitchen sometimes literally had a spicery, a whole department, saying that the Duke of Burgundy had a spicery, and it had like 30 people in it, and their sole job was to procure, manage, store, and grind spices, prepare the spices for the kitchen to use. So the head cook isn't worrying about grinding the spices. The head cook orders the spicery. I need so many ounces of ground cumin. make it happen, and the spicery grinds it for them. So that's how specialized a medieval kitchen was. So yeah, they had an entire department for grinding spices. And yes, that is why modern appliances were invented, to take the place of humans. Unfortunately, a lot of these modern devices don't really truly replicate these original methods. They do, but they add another level that's undesirable possibly for our actual cuisine. Yeah. Let me see. Okay, so let's go ahead and mix this together. We have our bacon diced as small as peas. We have our raw hen chopped finely, and we have our ground cumin. Okay, so it doesn't say how to mix it, but I'm going to bet that it's mixed with the hands. So I'm just going to go wash my hands again. And now I'm going to do something that will mean I have no need of moisturizer. So when you are mixing any kind of ground or chopped meat, you want to mix it delicately. You don't want to over process it. You don't want to do lots of squeezing, because the more you mechanically assault the meat, it will, especially once it's been ground like this, it will actually compact it and turn it into hockey pucks. So I see a lot of people that get ground beef and ground pork and whatever, and they'll like squeeze it through their hands to really mix it. You don't want to do that. You're making meat pucks. You are making a weapon out of meat, basically. So try not to squeeze it. Try to kind of let it, in this case, because there are some chunks here, actually kind of let it fall through your hands. The goal here is to make sure that everything is more or less evenly mixed, right? And then we're going to form it into, it says small pieces, but the implication of the pieces is that it should be little balls, basically. That's what cloten are. So we will be making little ones, and I think the specificity of the little balls is intentional, right? The idea is that these shouldn't be very big, because then they'll absorb there'll be more surface area to absorb the yummy flavors of the broth. So yeah. Oh, Missy Juju, it's easier to cut it thinly too. Gosh, I'm sorry, I missed. Oh yes, meat. You were talking about frozen meat. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Pro tip, if you need to cut meat thinly, like really thinly, when it's semi-frozen, super easy to do. When it's raw or room temperature, defrosted, definitely much easier to cut meat thinly if it's frozen. Yep, or semi-frozen. Just frozen enough to be stiff, not frozen enough that the knife bounces off of it. And of course, I also needed to kind of work that chicken skin in throughout as well, since we decided to incorporate some of that at any rate. We'll see if we regret that choice. We may or may not. So is anyone cooking along today or making something of their own? There was a question in last week's medieval cooking party. Is there a difference? That was a good question. Is there a difference between brown eggs and white eggs? No. It's about what the chicken eats. So, ideally you want a chicken that's free range, that eats grubs. And by that, I mean, it's got access to grass and trees, and that it's out there eating grubs. And ideally it's not grain fed. It's eating grubs, it's eating rodents. It's eating what chickens have evolved to eat rather than what we have given them to eat. It's eating grass, plants of various kinds, right? That's what you want your chickens to be eating. And then their eggs, the egg yolks, will be really rich with vitamins and will be much better balanced in terms of the fatty acid profile. Paula Wallace, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate that compliment. Ooh, knitting along. Missy Juju, what are you working on, my dear? Do share. Earlier before this, I was refining and you'll see I'm going to put a short video out reporting on the update on the reworked pattern for my Burgundian gown, the gown that should go over this one. I am super happy with how it's turned out. It's great. I really have fixed all of the issues, and I mean all of the issues that existed before. So I'm really, really pleased as could be about that. And I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to be making first thing I'm going to make with this new pattern. I have this amazing silky black wool, and I mean silky, shiny silky. Bought it last year at Royal Blue Traders, who are one of the few historic fabric vendors left now after the ridiculous tariffs. So yeah, if you'd like historical wools, check out Royal Blue Traders. They also have fantastic historical reproductions of medieval sewing tools or historical sewing tools, not necessarily just medieval, and also some small wares like linen ribbons and silk sewing thread and beeswax and things like that. Also button cutters. Anyway, I bought this amazing black wool from them, and I've had it for the last year, and I bought it with the intention of making my next so-called Burgundian gown. But of course, I needed to rework the pattern, and I just, for whatever reason, I didn't have the energy until just now to rework the pattern. So yeah, finally, I've got the mental energy to rework the pattern, and I've reworked the pattern, and I'm so excited with how it turned out. So yeah, I should be able to get that cut out this week. I've borrowed a sewing machine so I can do all the long seams, and then that will give me a nice fun sewing project for our medieval sewing parties on Queen Victoria. I hope you all are excited, thought of doing a medieval sewing party while I'm on my cruise, right? I might even just let you see me in one of my beautiful vintage evening gowns instead of wearing medieval clothes for the sewing party. I don't know. I'll have my medieval clothes with me anyway, because after my 14-day voyage, I'm heading to an immersive medieval living history 15th century event in the US. So I'm going to have one suitcase is going to be my medieval clothes anyway. So let's see. Okay. No green eggs and ham, right? Nope, no green eggs and ham. It's after midnight here in New Zealand, so I'm watching until sleep takes me. Erin, awesome. New Zealand, it's desperately on my list to go visit. I'm going to come to New Zealand, Erin, I promise. I'm not threatening you like I'm going to come in and invade your home, but I want to come to New Zealand so badly. Mr. Toad, thank you for that lovely compliment. Really appreciate that. Let me see. You keep saying dumplings and filling, which you believe there might be a dough, which I haven't heard you mention since I wasn't able to tune in, but I did tune in a little late. No problem. Okay. So this is, I was dumpling, I'm sorry if I mentioned, I was talking about pies. Maybe you tuned in when I was talking about pie. There is no dough here. And by filling, I think we were just sort of talking about the dumpling itself, honestly. So these dumplings are just meatballs, basically. But the the medieval Low German word, the 13th century Low German word is Kloten, which is the cognate for Klossen, Kartoffelklossen, right? In modern German, for instance. So yeah, that is what we are making here. I'm just smelling this to decide. I'm trying to get a sense for whether I should add some more cumin. Honestly, I don't think I want to. I don't think I want the cumin in the dumplings to be overwhelming, because there will be cumin in the flavorful broth. So I think what I'm aiming for here is cumin to be just enough that there's some flavor enhancing properties, that it adds more dimension to the meat. And I think that's what we've got, but I think I've decided I don't want it to be enough that it's overpowering. Again, we're having to make this call because there are zero quantities when it comes to almost anything, except for that we use one chicken to make the stock and one chicken for the meatballs, and then everything else is just take some pork belly, add cumin, saffron, wine, lard, salt, and egg yolks. Not a single quantity anywhere else. Yeah, watching it is wild. I know, Big Racer, you're right. It is absolutely wild. Watching medieval cooking in Korea from America. Yeah, there's definitely something about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start these. Now it just says small pieces. So again, we have to make these into small pieces. What is a small piece? I don't know. I don't know what their concept of small piece is. I'm going to kind of go based on what I know Kloten to be now, which are huge. So I'm going to not go with that. I'm going to go with, I think I'm going with something about 2 centimeters in diameter, basically. right? And it just says make them into small pieces. It doesn't say whether to make them round or not, just make them into small pieces. And I'm just going to go with they mean to make it into a ball because cloten are nowadays round. Yep. And I'm using water. That's why I have this bowl here to dip my fingers in so that it actually keeps the meat from sticking to my hands, right? So that's why I'm dipping my fingers, just like medieval people, in a little bowl of water here. Little bowl of water, because that will actually keep the meat from sticking to your hands, which it will, especially in this ground form. Get much less stickage. Yeah. Now, because it just says, this meat isn't ground, it's chopped finely, this is actually going to have more texture than a modern meatball would have because, again, no grinders, no meat grinders in this era. So I can already tell that it's going to have more texture, especially with the pork belly. But you know what? I think that's going to be pretty wonderful. I think it's going to make it even more interesting than a meatball made from finely ground meat would be, because it's going to have actual chunks in it that you actually have to chew. God forbid you have to chew your food. Oh, the humanity. Oh damn, I forgot to wet my fingers in between that one. Oh, the humanity. Right. So yeah, here's hoping that will keep it even more interesting. I was thinking about sausage too. So if you think about it, meat grinders are not a thing. You have to knife process the meat for sausage as well. So that's going to actually give you a very different texture on your sausage. Your sausage is also going to have more chew. It's going to have more texture. So that would also make medieval sausage a very different beast from what we're accustomed to modernly. So another thought I had when I was reading through this recipe. Is there such a thing as boiling chicken too long? Yeah, yes. So if your chicken, when you start extracting things from it that you don't want, then I would say it's too long. So this chicken is finally at the falling apart stage. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the broth off while I finish up these meatballs. But that's actually finishing up pretty well. So in my experience, I don't know about everyone else. What does everyone else think? Is there such a thing as boiling chicken too long? Yes. So if your chicken, it depends on what you want from your chicken, but you can actually start getting some very unpleasant flavor components, especially if it boils too long and it gets hot and the fat gets hot and the fat goes kind of rancid and funky. That's my experience with boiling chicken. This, however, is not the too long phase. And if I'd had more time, I honestly probably would, even though it does say boil an old hen, so it does mean at high temperature, I generally prefer to actually cook my chickens at a lower temperature. I'm distracted by talking to you all. I prefer to cook my chickens at a lower temperature and cook them more slowly. I find the flavors are better, and you get the better of the flavor, the nicer of the flavor and smell components, rather than some of the more unpleasant ones. Have any of you, overcooked, overboiled a chicken and or bone stock, and it's just gone that nasty, musty, stinky smell? Oh gosh, I'm way behind. So pelmeni are dough wrapped dumplings, kind of like Slavic wontons. Yeah, this is nothing like pelmeni. There is no dough, no dough at all. No, it is just the dumplings. It is just the meat is the dumpling, right? It's basically a meatball. But yeah. Oh goodness, I'm so far. A bunch of comments just showed up. Okay, of course they did.
Not working. Most of them are
Oh, darn it, I keep forgetting to. So the reason that you need to kind of like rinse your hands between dumplings is because meat will attract other meat. So little bits of meat from one dumpling that get up on your hands, then will attract more bits of meat onto your hands and off of the dumplings. Oh no. I forgot to turn off night mode. The screen just went very dark. Oh goodness. So that's why you want to rinse your hands, your fingers and your hands between rollings so that the meat stays with itself and in the dumpling and not attracted to the little bits of meat on your fingers and hands. And again, when I'm making meat patties or meatballs, you don't want to over roll it, because if you over roll it and you compact it too much, again, you're going to end up with a meat discus. You're going to end up with something that could be used, in a game of Clue to kill the butler in the library. So don't press down hard if you're rolling your meatballs, right? Don't press down hard, press down lightly so that there's just enough pressure for things to, come together, but not enough that you're turning it into a neutron star. Yeah, that sound is special. So what's interesting is that there is no other binder in this. None of the versions of this recipe have egg or breadcrumbs or anything. It's literally just relying on the proteins in the meat to do the binding. So that is very interesting. Okay, so after we finish the meatballs, I'm going to be separating out the yolks from the eggs, from the egg whites. And I'm going to pass the yolks through a strainer, even though it doesn't say to do that. The recipe just says add egg yolks to thicken it evenly, but I'm pretty certain that they're leaving out a really important step that they probably just knew how to do. And that important step would be to pass the eggs through a strainer into a bowl, add some of the hot broth into that, mixing it, stirring it as you do so, tempering the egg yolks, turning it into a kind of slurry that you then add into your broth, stirring as you do so, and then you'll end up with a thick broth instead of streaks of egg yolks in your broth. Will you sear the balls in the pan before adding them to the soup? I will not in this case. It does not say to do that. It says make this mixture into small pieces and place them in the broth of the boiled hen. So I'm going to abide by the recipe. Of course, in modern meatballs, certainly I would absolutely either bake them in the oven to give them a sear to start, or sear them in a pan, depending on how many I'm making. But here it doesn't say to do that. There's actually not often that you sear meat in medieval recipes. More often than not, meat is boiled rather than seared. And that could be because of the kind of skillets they had, which probably wouldn't lend themselves well to searing something like this, honestly. The skillets they had didn't have sides. They were just like metal discs basically on a long metal arm, so you could stand back from the fire, the coals and the hearth while you used it. So I could see how that would get really messy with no sides to keep the juices in. There's a possibility I should have diced the chicken meat a little bit more, but we'll find out. Oh, darn it. Again, didn't rinse my hands off. Yes, it's lightly seasoned with cumin. I could maybe going with a teaspoon of cumin next time for this much chicken. Yeah, I think next time I would probably go with a teaspoon. On the other hand, the broth will probably be quite flavorful and will probably add quite a bit to it. Okay, here we go. Good evening, Varum. We are making what are called Hunderkloten in 13th century Low German. They are chicken dumplings or chicken meatballs, perhaps. you should say. This is basically chicken that has been so-called chopped finely with a knife, and it will be added to a broth that we're working on in the back and then cooked so that it's nice and flavorful. The broth is going to be thickened with egg yolks, and yeah, it should be quite tasty. This is a 13th century recipe, but possibly dates to the 12th century, they think. So yeah, that is what we are working on tonight. So the sauce, I'm about to remove the chicken from the so-called old chicken from the broth, and I'll put that in another bowl. As I said before, unfortunately, I don't have any of my nice medieval bowls here. Yeah, hopefully I'll have access to them soon, but for now I don't. Oh yeah, this cooked long enough to be literally fall apart tender. But that's good, because that means if it's falling apart like it is, that's good, because that means that a lot of that collagen, that connective tissue, has broken down and is now in this broth, which is what I wanted. It doesn't say that particularly that that's how far you need to go, but that's what I wanted, because I know that will make this broth silky and rich with collagen. It'll be super yummy. Collagen for the win. Right, so that is definitely what I wanted. So I don't really care about getting all the little meat bits out, obviously, or maybe not obviously. I don't care about getting all the little meat bits out. I do care about getting out the bones, though. Okay, so this is what I meant by it's fall apart, right? Ready to fall apart. All that connective tissue is really broken down. That'll make some really yummy chicken salad. Okay, so now it says cumin, and again, we don't have a quantity. So I'm going to go ahead, and it says to place them in this broth and add, but I'm going to assume that the order of operations is maybe not exactly right. I'm going to add all this stuff first and then add the meatballs in, just because yeah. So I put about half a teaspoon of cumin seed in there, and this is saffron. For those who don't know, saffron is the stamen of a specific saffron crocus. It comes from Persia originally, but it actually grows apparently the best in Spain, from what I understand. They started growing saffron in England in the 14th century, making it more accessible, but it still has to be processed by hand, because you have to literally remove the tiny, delicate stamina from the blossom. Or you have to pull it out of the flower. Can only be done manually. So I've got about, I don't know, a bunch of saffron here, and I'm just going to put that in. It might be too much. Who knows? And then it says wine. It doesn't say how much wine. This is a replica 15th century Guttural decanter. It is a Central European style historical glasswares. And again, it doesn't say how much. I'm going to probably put about a cup in. I do know that they really like their wine broth. And you can definitely see some of these techniques to this day. You know, this style of cooking is still pretty heavy in French cuisine, also Italian cuisine, you know, making a nice wine broth, so to say. And then it says to add lard. Well, I don't know how much. So I'm just going to take a spoonful. It's probably about a tablespoon. And I'm imagining that this lard will hopefully bind with the egg yolk. I'm hoping that's what's going to happen. Speaking of which, so I do have a medieval style strainer, but it's huge. It's really way too big. So I'm going to use my modern strainer, which in many ways does actually come pretty close to a medieval strainer, to do the eggs. So passing the egg yolks through a strainer is a very common way to so-called whisk your eggs in an era before there were whisks. I found zero evidence of whisks. And if you don't know what a whisk is, this is whisk. I found zero evidence of whisks in this era. But what they do instead is they have a strainer, and they pass things through the strainer to whisk it up, to beat it up. And so especially for egg yolks. So we have to separate the eggs out. No problem. What was in here? Oh, pork belly was in here. No, I can put it in there. Again, it just says egg yolks to thicken it evenly. Well, I kind of want this sauce to be thick. It does say it should be thickened, so I think I'm actually going to put, thinking about the amount of liquid I have here, probably going to put 3 egg yolks in it. Yeah, I'm probably going to put 3 egg yolks in it. And for those who don't know, one of the best ways to separate your yolks from your whites is actually just through your fingers. You can use the eggshells if you want, but so we actually put the yolk there. And it will start leaking through on its own, but I'll show you here in a moment how you can use a spoon to encourage the straining process, putting your egg yolks through a strainer. And the reason we want just the egg yolks is because we don't want the protein from the whites. It will just kind of curdle and become chunks of white. It's not going to be very appealing. We just want the thickening properties of the egg yolks and that lovely emulsification. Because egg yolks contain lecithin, natural lecithin, and that is an emulsifier. So it literally thickens things. It's fantastic. It's what gives you that yummy, silky mouthfeel. Okay, I decided to go with 4 egg yolks. Went with 4 egg yolks. Okay, now, get rid of these shells. Okay, shells are there. I am now going to take, this is actually a replica medieval spoon, and I'm actually going to use it to push the egg yolks through the strainer like this. And this is also sort of induces a kind of trance for me as well. I tell you, hand food processing is just so enjoyable. Yep. Just in general, using a lot of these medieval food processing techniques, there's just, it just feels so much more satisfying than just breaking out a machine and going to it. Okay, now on the back side, there's going to be a lot there that hasn't yet strained through, so I'm just going to use the spoon to encourage that. They did not have rubber scrapers in the Middle Ages. They didn't have anything that was really equivalent, as far as I know. Like they didn't make them out of leather or something. I have zero evidence of that. But you know, you can get pretty good with a wooden spatula, certain wooden implements, or a spoon like this. Okay, so let me show you what that did to the egg. And you could actually, there are some recipes where it says to pass it through a strainer multiple times, but you can see that actually does a pretty good job at making it nice and fine. And then you can take your spoon and just give it a nice whiskey whisk like that. Or stir it with your spoon, right? Okay. Now, at this point, I'm actually going to stop using this metal spoon because we're about to add something that has some acid in it. And I don't trust this metal, the spoon, the alloy of this spoon to not have issues with the acid in this sauce. So this is still warm. So what we're now going to do is what's called tempering. So I'm actually going to take a spoonful of this, just a spoonful of this warm broth. And as I'm stirring with a wooden spatula, I'm going to slowly add that spoonful of broth into the egg yolk while stirring. And then I'll add another spoonful while stirring. And that's going to do what's called tempering the egg yolk. So it's going to prevent it from just completely breaking apart and turning into chunks of egg yolk instead of a nice smooth egg yolk. Isn't this beautiful? This is an olive wood ladle that I got in Florence. Okay, so now first I'll stir to some of these ingredients. Okay. Ladle full, spatula, stirring, mixing. Sorry, I just realized. There we go. Stirring and mixing. Okay. So just kind of adding it slowly so that it doesn't have a chance to cause a thermal shock reaction of sudden overwhelming heat. turning it into, like I said, chunks. No one wants chunks. Gosh, it smells good already. Wow, that smells really so delicious. Just the wine and the cumin and the cumin seed and the saffron already smell amazing. So basically, I keep adding broth until the yolk is actually warm, not hot, just warm, because then the temperature should be close enough that it can be added to the hot broth, and then we'll worry about bringing it to a boil. So I'm definitely not going to add this to a boiling liquid. I'm going to add this to the warm liquid, and then I'm going to bring it up to a boil. And no, that is not what the recipe says. But again, I'm going to reemphasize that a lot of these recipes take, some very basic, what are basic culinary techniques for granted. So this is where in interpreting these recipes, sometimes you do have to bring your modern knowledge to the table, because the modern knowledge we have in many cases is the same kind of knowledge a historical cook would have had to. Okay. Oh, it smells so good. So yummy. Okay. So it's now warm. I can feel it through the bowl, the metal bowl. It's now warm. So now I'm going to go ahead and while stirring, add this in slowly. Okay. Oh gosh, that smells amazing. Oh, so good. I'm going to use my wooden spatula to try to get out some of those bits and bobs, as Philip, my friend Philip from Irish Medieval History, would say. Okay. And now I'm going to go ahead and bring it back up to a boil. And I am going to bring it back up to a boil because I do want it to I've decided I want it to be hot when I add these dumplings, so that there is actually a seizing action, because I'm actually concerned with the lack of other binding in them, that if I added them now, they would just fall apart in the sauce. And I'm pretty certain that's not what's supposed to happen. So I want this to come back up to a hot, almost boiling, simmering, at least a simmering temperature, so that when I add this, the proteins will immediately seize and form, they'll adhere together, therefore. Good thing you already had lunch, Missy Juju. Yeah. Oh, wow. Especially that wine. Oh, yeah, that's delicious. That's really amazing. Oh, salt. I forgot salt. Salt from my salt cellar. Well, my salt cellar. The salt cellar that Todd Cutler made. And I think I'm going to put in a teaspoon, at least, for now. You can always add more later. And this is a medium dry red wine with some of that sweet wine that I had from from last week's medieval cooking party mixed in. And because this has the egg yolks in it, I am constantly stirring while it comes up to temperature. Oh, Missy Juju is knitting leg warmers for my niece. Oh, wonderful. Are these fashion leg warmers, or does she actually do ballet? Oh, yeah. So just stirring. And the interesting thing about the aromatics that have been added in here, the cumin and the saffron, which in this case I've chosen to interpret as in their whole form because it's going in this broth, is that they will actually definitely benefit from some cooking time. Absolutely. The good thing is that basically once this egg yolk thickens, it won't curdle after that. It will just stay as a nice cohesive thickened mass. That's fantastic. Yeah, so when we boiled the old hen, we had no idea how much water that should take. When we yeah, so the joy of medieval cooking here is that like there is no knowledge that we have. We don't know which of these spices, how much of these spices we should use. We know which ones, just not how much. We don't know how much wine should go in. We don't know how many egg yolks should go in. So it's entirely possible that someone else, and entirely likely, in fact, that someone else would redact this recipe, recreate this recipe, and come up with a dish that is utterly unlike anything I've just done here. Medieval professional chef. I'm definitely a medieval amateur chef, I would say. Oh no, Takeda, it's okay. You can always go back and watch. 2 left feet for ballet. Top man, we are actually working on a 13th century northern European dish, possibly Scandinavian, but German at the very least, called Hühnerkloten, which means chicken dumplings. And right now we're working on getting the broth, the sauce / broth, up to temperature. The broth consists of the chicken broth from boiling an old chicken. We don't actually have an old chicken. It was just a regular young chicken, probably. That now contains cumin and wine and saffron and salt and lard and egg yolks. So that is what I'm just now working on, getting that back up to temperature. And I'm stirring as it does that because I want the egg yolks to emulsify. I don't want them to cook to separate out. No, Pritam, I know you were just kidding, but I was just emphasizing for anyone who thinks that that I also have a little bit of imposter syndrome, so there is that. But in the medieval cooking world, I'm middle of the pack in terms of experience and knowledge. I have cooking friends who definitely have taken it to the next 3 levels. Medieval cooking. No, Pritam, I knew you were kidding. I was kidding back too, a little bit, but not entirely. Now, the nice thing about this is if I decide that this broth at the end of the cooking process, the broth isn't thick enough, I can always go ahead and add more, work on adding some more egg yolks to take it to the next level of thickness. It does say to thicken it evenly, so. Yeah. It's going to be pretty tasty. Cumin, saffron, wine. Yep. Okay. Now, yeah, the disadvantage of a clay pot is that it does take longer to heat up. The advantage is that it retains its heat for much longer. Oh my God, that sounds, yeah, I know, Takeda. Doesn't that sound delicious? Yeah. So that's what's going to be the cloten, the Hühnerkloten are going to be cooked in this. So all those yummy flavors should also therefore be absorbed by the Hühnerkloten. I'm just bringing it back up to a boil or a simmer at least, because I want it to be hot enough, the liquid to be hot enough that it causes our Hühnerkloten to actually seize when they're put into it, because otherwise I'm worried they might kind of fall apart if it's not actually hot enough to trigger that. Yeah, it could be, as I was rolling them up, I realized maybe I needed to abuse the chicken some more with a knife, but this is all very experimental. Literally tonight I did pre-read the recipe and came to some ideas and conclusions, but I've never made this recipe before. So this is actually us literally making it for the first time. Yeah, this broth this sauce is going to be super tasty. I can tell. I will tell you right now it's an unappealing color because the wine combined with the egg yolk to make not the prettiest color. But hopefully the saffron will eventually, I can see the yellow is leaching out of the saffron actually, so hopefully it will turn it a more appealing color. Oh goodness, yeah. As it cooks, hopefully that will yeah, it will leach the dye stuff out of the saffron along with the flavors and make something that looks less like gruel, like your worst nightmare of gruel. Anyway. Mm. Oh, that was a big chunk of salt on the back. Oh my goodness, where's my, I need a drinking vessel. Where are all the drinking vessels? Oh, that was salsa on the back of the spoon. It was a big deposit of salt. Oh, some of you were asking me about Himalayan sea salt. So apparently Alexander the Great, in his conquests, in sort of, you know, as he made his way across what is now Pakistan, Afghanistan, and into India, he actually encountered pink Himalayan sea salt, and he set up apparently a trade of pink Himalayan sea salt back to Europe. Now, what I don't know, that was back during Alexander the Great, so 4th century BC. So what I don't know is if that trade with pink Himalayan salt continued or not. I don't know that. But apparently Alexander the Great did encounter it. He loved it and set up a trade network with that salt, and it became a highly prized commodity in the ancient Mediterranean. But I don't know if that kept going or not. Oh, Top Man, lovely. I'm so glad that I could inspire you. Takeda says, I wonder if they would have a pot of salt water at a boiling boil to seize the outside of the dumplings and immediately transfer them into the simmering sauce. No, it says here, I mean, maybe that's assumed, but it does say make them into small pieces, then place them in the broth of the boiled hen. And the weirdest part is it says then add all of these ingredients, but that just doesn't make any sense, especially with the egg yolks. So I'm not certain if that's the copyist got it wrong, because these all seem to be copied from one or text, as they say in academic circles. And so, and it looks like one was copied from the other to the other to the other. So the problem is if one of those sequences was out of order in the earlier text, then that likely just got copied and recopied. That's how a lot of these errors end up getting transferred. Even, you know, you could say, well, there are 4 different sources and they all say the same thing. Okay, but the 4 different sources are copied off of an original one of the older ones. The later ones are copied from the earlier one. So if there's a mistake in the earlier one, then that just gets copied and passed along. Because there's not really an editorial process here, you know what I mean? Okay, we are now boiling. I think maybe I won't use my fingers to do that. I think maybe I'll use something that doesn't put my fingers in the boiling steam. Okay, so let me just put that there so you can maybe see better what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm saying bloop. It just seems like the thing to do. Oh gosh, I'm so excited by this dish. I've often wanted, you know, I don't want to travel back to the past, but I wouldn't mind bringing someone forward to our time from the past and then making this dish for them and seeing if they recognize it, or if they're like, wow, this is an amazing dish. You people cook interesting food, which would then tell us, of course, that we didn't get it right. Like, oh, I see, we did not correctly interpret your recipe. It's the same thing with clothing. I would love to, and the reason I don't want to go back is because I don't want to die the 1,000 ways that we were more likely to die, especially as a woman in the 15th century. But I would love to bring someone forward, show them my clothes, and see whether they say, oh, wow, I saw someone wandering around the piazza the other day in that, or wow, it's really cool the kind of clothes you guys wear these days, right? Because one response will tell us we got it correct. The other response will tell us we didn't get it correct. But yeah, a lot of you, my dears, have often asked me if I could go back to any place in time, which would I pick? And then I always respond, do I have to go back in time? Because I understand the realities of what it would be like traveling back to many of these times and places. And it wouldn't necessarily end well. Yeah, vendetta kia. Yes, the word salary in Rome, people got paid in salt because it had the same value. Yes, so a lot of words in Europe are rooted in salt because of the value of salt and because of how the salt was used in its making. Salsiccia, sausage, at its root is a salted meat. Salsa, the word for sauce, actually in Latin, and then of course in the modern thing we associate with Mexican cuisine, also comes from a liquid, a salty liquid. Also, salsa, sausage, celery, obviously. There's another common dish. Oh, salad is from erba salata, or herbe salate, which means salted herbs, because the salad was originally, herbs, green leafy things to which you added salt. And then we just kind of got rid of the word herb and just went with the salata, the salad part. So yeah, there's so many ways in which the word salt has actually infiltrated our modern food cuisine because of how important it was. And yes, salary, exactly, because in ancient Rome, often soldiers would be paid in salt. It's a very valuable substance. Salt has literally made modern civilization possible, not an exaggeration. Okay, question. What is a medieval food myth that we still hold on to today that you wish we would drop? My very Italian grandmother used to swear pumpkin seeds were carcinogenic in the old country. Oh my gosh, yeah, okay, so food-related myth. Food-related myth. That everyone ate giant turkey legs, or that royalty ate giant turkey legs. They didn't. I don't think Henry VIII did either. Or let's see, that medieval food was crude, unsophisticated, and roundly disgusting. It was none of those things. It was highly sophisticated. It was very interesting and flavorful with all sorts of different textures, sweet, savory, sour, highly specialized. Or that medieval food was unhealthy. It isn't. A lot of medieval dishes are actually very nutritious, especially with all these spices in them. Now, obviously, these spices even now aren't cheap, but they were insanely expensive back then. Like 7 black peppercorns in 14th century Germany would be enough for an annual salary for a mid-level artisan, for instance. So, but the point is that these spices are very nutritionally dense. They have lots of powerful micronutrients, antioxidants, bioflavonoids. And so, by adding these spices to the dish, you're not only getting a more delicious dish, you're actually getting a much more nutritious and health-giving dish. So yeah, that's definitely one of the big myths I would get rid of. Trying to explain to a Swiss peasant from 1200 that we have a magic light box in our pocket that holds 99% of the world's info, but we just use it to argue with strangers about politics. Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? Meanwhile, that 1200 peasant really just wants wants his crop to be successful, to not be blighted, for there not to be a drought, for it not to be overwatered. Yeah, for certain. Okay, so I'm just looking around. So yeah, basically we're now at the cooking point. It's bubbling along nicely, and as I predicted, honestly, I definitely don't have the energy because it's late my time. I've been awake for 17 hours now. So I definitely don't have the energy or the maybe mental capacity even to do another couple of hours to do the almond thing I wanted to make. So the other thing, I think next week we'll focus on the almonds then. So the thing we'll be working on next week. Nope, we will not be working on this next week. I might host because I'll be on a Vietnam air flight to Charles de Gaulle Airport this time next week. So yeah, I will not be cooking. They'll be very upset if I start cooking on that Vietnam air flight. So the next medieval cooking live stream we do, which I might host one this week before we leave. We'll see what my schedule's like. Is going to be almond butter, medieval almond butter, and possibly one other almond dish. So I'm going to show you how to make almond milk using a mortar and pestle, not a food processor, using the medieval method as described in the sources. So we're going to be doing that, and then we're going to turn that into what they call almond butter, which is basically coagulated almond milk that is then strained. And that could be used in place of, and it has a little bit of vinegar for the coagulation. It gives it that tang of cream cheese. So it's actually a medieval vegan cream cheese recipe. actually, but it was used on Lenten days, on Ember days, when you weren't supposed to have animal products like cheese, like butter, like cream, like milk. So I've read this recipe in multiple places. It's supposed to be sliceable. And the recipe I found in this cookbook actually had the most explicit instructions in this recipe collection of 35 recipes from Northern Europe. The other recipes mention nothing about how to get it to thicken, how to get it to coagulate. None of them say about straining it or draining it. So it's, you know, it was always a mystery. I'm like, well, how do you go from thick almond milk, as they say, take thick almond milk and then this doesn't even say add acid or anything. It says strain it and then slice it. And you're like, okay, but if I put almond milk in a cloth and linen, it's just going to go through it. There will be nothing left. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. What time is it over in my kitchen? It is currently 10:36 p.m. on Saturday, the 20th. Yeah. Yeah, so almond butter. So we're going to be making medieval almond butter, which is nothing like modern almond butter. Okay, so far so good. It looks like our dumplings are in fact holding together with each other, I mean. Hopefully not forming a cohesive, unified mass. The smell is amazing. Yeah, the smell is quite amazing. And it just says, yep, nothing about cook it until it's done or anything else. It just says to thicken it evenly. And actually, I will say that the egg yolks seem to have either separated out or vanished, interestingly. So what I'm probably going to do to actually make a nice so-called thick sauce is, again, this isn't in the original recipe in terms of order of operations, but once these dumplings, the kloten, are actually done, as in cooked, however we define done in this case, I will take them out and then I will mix up some more egg yolks and add that in to thicken the sauce. Because it says it should be thickened evenly. But what's interesting is, yeah, there's nothing in there that exactly, but you know, if I'm looking, this could also just be some of the protein, the particulate protein that's come out of the chicken itself, probably, rather than from the egg yolks in the broth. But it could also be the egg yolks. It's hard to tell. So yeah, we're now at I don't want it to boil because it doesn't say to boil. I really just want it to simmer at this point. And so my hope is that the broth will absorb out a lot of not the broth, the chicken, the dumplings will actually absorb the salt and the flavorings out of the broth and into themselves. And I might find that the next time I make this, I want to add more spices. I don't know. I didn't want to overspice it this first time. I think that's often a problem, actually, in modern interpretations of medieval kitchens, is that in the interest of not being boringly modern, they overspice things. You know, well, it must be exotic and so spicy that you're just overwhelmed by all these flavors. And I don't know that that's really true either. So, you know, sometimes there is something to be said for more delicate combinations. But also, these spices were insanely expensive. So I just don't see, even in the wealthy kitchens, I don't see them taking handfuls of these expensive ingredients that have been basically transported from Indonesia in many cases all the way to Western Europe. I don't see them taking handfuls of them and throwing them in a pot of broth that serves 4 people, for instance. Yeah, it just even for the wealthy, that just doesn't track for me necessarily. So, yeah. Don't forget that you have to put a lot of balls in the broth that may take longer to cook them because the quantities lowered the temperature. Oh no, it's fine. It's it's back up to boiling. But yeah, no, you're right. It could take longer to cook them. Absolutely. Kloten, Kloten in 13th century Low German just means dumpling. Sorry. Yeah. Talking about 13th century Low German, not modern, whatever dialect. Dutch, maybe? Are you speaking Dutch? Yeah, this is Low German. 13th century, no less. So just for, because I can always put it back in if it's not cooked. Okay, so here is, okay, it's definitely chunky and it's not smooth, but the nice thing about surface area like this is that if we actually have a nice thick sauce, then it will cling to it better than if it's smooth. So let's go ahead and not put it on the raw chicken plate, shall we? Let's go ahead and cut this baby open and see just what this one looks like. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and cut this baby open. Okay, well, there is no pink. There are no pink juices. So in terms of being done, it is certainly done. In terms of, you know, being no longer will it give you food poisoning, but let's see what the flavors are. I expect, especially with the pork belly, that probably cooking it longer is not a bad thing, in fact. Okay, let's give it a smell. Even though it's only cooked for that little bit of time, it's super yummy. Chicken itself is, of course, pretty lean, relatively speaking, but the pork belly, of course, is not. So that's a great combination. And it's not overpoweringly flavorful yet, but I think that will change as it cooks longer in the broth and absorbs more of the flavors. And it is definitely absorbing salt from the broth because I didn't add any salt. And normally I'm a salty person. So, this is super tasty. I can definitely see how this would be delicious to just, you know, pull out of your haversack and just gnaw on one. Really tasty. Oh, Ali, welcome. Oh, yeah, Kloten is Flemish. Okay, got it. Yeah, so Kloten, Kloten is also Low German from the 13th century. Yeah. So yeah, there's also, you know, there's a lot of overlap in, especially the further back you go in European history. There is definitely overlap, and you know, Flemish is definitely absolutely related to Low German, 100%. They're cousin languages, basically, and maybe even possibly mutually intelligible in the 13th century. Okay, Ali, we are making Hunderkloten, which does not mean chicken ball sacks. It means chicken dumplings in 13th century Low German, and it's a combination of chicken and pork belly. And it's currently back here. The dumplings are bubbling away in this yummy spice broth here. And yeah, the pork belly, yeah, really adds a wonderful richness to the chicken. Now, again, the original recipe doesn't say how much pork belly to how much chicken. So next time I might actually increase the ratio of pork belly so there's more pork belly, but I love pork belly. Yeah, I might actually increase the ratio to give the chicken even more flavor. I think I would definitely add more cumin next time. I would probably double the amount of cumin easily. Yeah, but honestly, I don't think I needed to add the salt in, because I can taste that even at just this little bit of cooking that's happened, it definitely has absorbed a bunch of the salt. So yeah, it's quite delicious. So I'm going to try to actually I'm actually going to try to remember to write up the recipe this time that I came up with, and also make notes about the things I'm going to change for next time. I'll try to actually do that this time around. Vendetta says, I'm Flemish. Very cool. And I speak German. To me, it's weird Flemish. So I speak German and okay, don't hate me. I have lots of Dutch friends. I love my Dutch friends, but to me, Dutch and Flemish sound a little bit like baby German. Sorry. Don't hate me for saying that, please. Ludovica says, do the dumplings have pastry or are they more like meatballs? So they are what many people would think of as meatballs now, but the word dumpling has in English has a broader connotation than just something wrapped in dough. So dumpling also has the meaning of like anything that's kind of balled together and cooked, right? So yeah, so you might call it meatballs, but the word kloten actually really translates to dumpling, and this is the medieval idea of what a dumpling was, shall we say? Yeah, so it's just there is no pastry at all, and that's the great thing about this. This was makes it a simple dish. Especially if you use modern conveniences to make it versus my intentionally laborious processing here. If you use modern implements to make this, if you use meat that's ground in a in a food processor or in a meat grinder, even it'll be easier. Pre-ground meat even easier. What I like about this is that you don't have the fuss of fiddling with a dough that you then have to make and roll out and then manage each one. All you have to do is make the dumplings themselves, the meatballs, as you say, and then that's it. And then you can make these in large quantities, freeze them, and then you've got this great, easy to manage finger food that you can then bring with you to medieval events. And it's a very, very authentic medieval dish. No bread, no gluten at all. So it's really great for people who are gluten sensitive or celiac. Yeah. The connotation of words, even now in modern times, dumpling doesn't always necessarily mean dough. Yeah, for instance, what's the word I'm looking for? Farina dumplings. It's made with farina, but it's not like, yeah, I guess that is a kind of dough, it's a batter really, right? Yeah. Yeah, that is an interesting word. What's the etymology of the word dumpling? It's a good question. Oh, no, better not do that. That could get very angry with me. Okay, well, everyone, I think we have reached the end of tonight's medieval cooking party. Are there any final questions? Tomorrow I will be doing another medieval sewing party. And then on the day after that, Monday morning my time, Sunday evening America's, middle of the night Europe, medieval story time. So yeah, stay tuned for all of that fun. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as I said, as some of you heard, but some of you just joined, I am embarking on a month of travel, but I will still be live streaming. It'll just be from a different venue. So as of next Saturday, I'm heading to Europe. I'm going specifically to Barcelona to embark on a 14-day Eastern Mediterranean voyage, Turkey and Greece. But I will be doing some medieval sewing party live streams from aboard Queen Victoria. So stay tuned for that. We will be doing some live stream tours of historic sites like Topkapi Palace, where I'll be wearing my 18th century Turkish clothing. And we'll be doing a live stream from the Gothic quarter of Barcelona, where I'll be wearing my Burgundian finery. And yeah, if you wanted to stay tuned on the travel side of things, check out Travels with the Creative Contessa. I'll be vlogging and live streaming all of our actual cruising adventures there. So yeah, stay tuned for more fun. Yep. Otherwise, everyone, thank you all for joining me for this lovely medieval cooking party. Until tomorrow or the day after, I hope you all have a lovely and creative morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are all in the world. And I would like to thank my patrons and channel members, as always, for supporting my work. All of you who do super chats and all of you who just join in the party, participate in the live stream, hit like, leave an emoji, and have just become part of this growing community. I really appreciate you all of your support in all of its forms. Oh, Ludovica, I love Italy, and I was getting there several times a year. This last year has just been garbage. But Ludovica, I will absolutely take you up on that offer. Yeah, love Italy. Love it. Fantastic place. It's not much of a vacation. It's really a working trip. I just work from wherever I happen to be. I'll just be aboard a cruise ship while working, but that's okay. That's okay. We'll see. I appreciate you all. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and I hope to see you all tomorrow.